Puedes empezar, José Luis.
Buen día a todas y a todos. Iniciamos esta sesión de...
Good morning, everyone. We're going to begin the closing of the European Forum that has been organized online and now live through Facebook due to the current circumstances. We hope you're all well and that you are happy to be here with us in this closing event. It will be the opportunity to analyze the work and to present the debates that we have held the last weeks. We will give the floor first to Pierre Laurent, that will present the development and outcome of the European Forum. And in this way, we'll be able to be aware of its importance. We then hear the reports of the debates of the European Forum, and then a second part of this closing event with the interventions of different representatives of the family of the European left. And we will, in the end, present the final declaration and the action plan that we have elaborated jointly. So I welcome you all, and I give the floor to Pierre Laurent, Vice President of the Party of the European Left, coordinator of this forum, and he will present the outcome of the European Forum. I would like to request of the different speakers to please stick to the time that has been allocated to comply with the schedule that we have, and you will also facilitate my work as moderator. Pierre, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, José Luis. Indeed, we're extremely happy to be able to be together for this last day of this European Forum of left-wing, progressive and ecologist forces of Europe. This is the 4th edition of this European Forum. Indeed, as José Luis just said, this is a special edition, an exceptional edition, I would say, first of all, because this has been exclusively held online and we have had to experiment and use new ways to exchange, given the COVID-19 pandemic. But beyond this, I would say, this technical challenge, of course, the times we live are exceptional. And we live an historical period which sort of concentrates together all sorts of challenges. Of course, one of the challenges we face is the pandemic and the health crisis we face. But also we have other crises. And I think among those crises, I would mention poverty, unemployment, inequality. And this is actually even more visible today through the pandemic. We also have the climate challenge and the ecological challenge that we face. I think the pandemic also shows very clearly that the models that we have been using to build the European Union until now have to be totally reviewed and transformed. And I think that the relationship between Europe and the world, the issue of migrants, the absolutely terrible situation that migrants face in Europe and at the borders of Europe, the issues that we face in terms of the collective security of Europeans is absolutely visible today. We also have a budgetary crisis here in the EU. The EU seems to be unable to adopt a budget. We've had Brexit, and we see that authoritarian governments in Poland and in Hungary are now blocking European solidarity mechanisms. So time has come for us to start rethinking the European project, to give it a new meaning and to focus that reconstruction on a new type of solidarity and joint development. This is what we said when we started on day one, when we launched this European Forum. We were already, of course, busy preparing the forum. When the COVID-19 crisis erupted, we decided that we would continue with the forum and would switch it to a virtual environment, and I think we were right to do so. Some figures before I give the floor to the next speaker. More than 1,000, sorry, almost 1,500 people registered from all European countries, and we've had 24 hours of discussions in 22 different thematic events. Among the registered, more than 1,350 actually participated to the events. I must say also that 150 speakers were involved and participated actively with speeches, with interventions, a very diverse list of speakers, by the way, representing all the families that we work with, from political families to trade unions, NGOs, and various associations. 83 women took the floor and 77 men. And we're quite proud to have gone beyond just a 50-50 distribution. There we've had more female speakers than men. And then social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram were heavily used. And I think we've had a lot of participants or people who have taken part through social media platforms. The discussions, the analysis, and the proposals that were made were extremely, have been extremely rich. The challenge for us was to, of course, talk, but also talk and come up with possible actions. And I think we've successfully done that. We now need to focus on action, and particularly on joint action. You're going to hear the reports from the various thematic events. You will also be presented today with the final report and the action plans. But I think what matters here is not just those final documents or the plan of action. It's also all of the thematic reports. I think they together make up, I would say, the common heritage that we will keep and share and nurture. And I think Europe today, obviously, is in between two very visible options. We have the neoliberal approach. We have the austerity policies. We've got this competition that has been created between workers and the destruction of the climate. That's one of the forces we face. And then on the other side, we have, in response to this neoliberal fascism, we've got populism, extreme right movements, nationalist movements in many in many member states of the EU. And this is also a very scary evolution. We have seen that those forces have been born out of the crisis of the EU. We believe that a third way is possible, an approach that is based on solidarity, based on a new development approach, union of sovereign people, yes, but people who are actually able to show solidarity with each other. And this is what we want to do. We want to activate those forces, make them converge. And this is why we organize this forum every year. We know, of course, that it's not going to be easy. It's going to be a struggle. Building something is not always easy, particularly because we obviously are diverse and come from different families. But despite our differences, we can and we should move forward together jointly, because that's how we can build a better future for Europe. Before giving back the floor to José Luis for the various thematic reports, I want to say a few words of thanks. And I want to thank everybody who's contributed to this forum, starting with our interpreters. As I said, dozens of hours of discussions have taken place with participants from across the world. This would not have been possible, of course, without the support of interpreters. And I want to thank them for the many hours of support that they have given to us. Thank you for your contribution. I also want to thank, of course, the select coordination group that has been working to organize all of these forums. They decided that, yes, this forum had to take place. And I want to thank Lena, Alberto, Daniele, Piera, and all those who have helped us, not only in ensuring that this would work, technically speaking, but also in the work they did on the content, on the construction of the topics, on the construction of the structure of this forum. Thank you to them. I want to thank the GUE NGL group as well, which is now a strong partner, of course, of this forum. All the foundations, of course, that have contributed, Transform, Rosa Luxemburg, the Green Foundation, and all the other organizations and individuals who've joined in and contributed to this event. As I said, this has been an experimental approach for us. It's the first time we've done this online, but I think it's worked. And then we will continue, of course, working in the future. We'll talk about that later. Let's now go maybe back to José Luis for the rest of the program. Thank you for your attention.
Bien, Jean-Pierre, pues en esa línea de
Thank you very much. Thank you, Pierre. So now we will go on to listen to the different reports. I will give the floor to David Joseph Tesfay from GUE NGL, and he is going to briefly present the conclusions regarding EU migration policies. You have the...
Okay, so good morning, everyone. So as it has been stated, I'll be presenting the general conclusions for the seminar that was organized on the 10th of November, which is called EU Migration Policies in Humanity in Law and Practice versus Alternatives. So during 2 hours, speakers gave their opinions on EU migration policies. They were divided into 2 panels. The first panel focused on the actual experience of the situation on the ground, so the translation of the current policies in reality, while the second panel focused on the Commission's new proposal and the possible alternatives. The speakers for the first panel were Milena Zachovic, President of Are You Serious, Head of Advocacy, Border Violence and Monitoring Network, Helena Maleno, Human Rights Defender in Caminando Fronteras, and Inigo Mijangos, President of Salvamento Marítimo Humanitario Aitamari. So they have underlined that migrants and human rights defenders are being constantly criminalized. In this context, Frontex plays an important role. Mrs. Maleno has highlighted how Frontex is now increasing its presence further west up into the Canary Islands since the reopening of a migration route in the Atlantic that was closed in 2006. They all stressed the need for legal pathways and the need to deal with migration in a human rights perspective. Furthermore, they have stressed the importance of communicating about the reality on the ground. Mrs. Zachovic called for the creation of a truly independent monitoring mechanism that would be run by national preventive mechanisms and independent NGOs. It would be funded by the Commission as well as border and independent agencies, and it would consist of unannounced visits to border areas and policy stations in border areas with full access to data and border police stations and enhanced cross-border cooperation. This control mechanism would benefit from an alarm system that could be triggered by potential asylum seekers in situations where their fundamental rights are being violated. So that was for the first speakers. The speakers for the second panel were David Conlon-Smith, Senior Counsel, member of the European Lawyers on Lesbos, and Anila Noor, Global Refugee-led Network and founder of the New Women Connectors. Mr. Smith has highlighted some of the main problematics of the new pact. He showed, for instance, that it is unclear how vulnerability will be assessed during the pre-entry screening. He also showed how the monitoring mechanism proposed on the new pact is vague and general, and it does not establish a clear link between national and EU laws. Most importantly, the new pact would allow individual detention to become more common across the EU, as well as undermining migrants' right to legal representation. Mrs. Noor has underlined the need to work with civil society organizations, migrant-led organizations, and to include migrants in dialogue and make their voices heard. She also stressed that there are positive examples and that we need to take account of these examples and to learn from them. To conclude, all participants expressed the opinion that there should be broad cooperation in the upcoming months in order to create a concrete alternative position to the Commission's proposal and a strong political and social mobilization in order to end with the restrictive migration policies and to bring forward a model that respects all human beings and is in line with international law and EU's obligation to protect with the highest humanitarian standards. In this sense, the GUE NGL group is organizing a webinar on the alternatives to the pact on the 2nd of December at 10 a.m. and more information can be found on the GUE NGL website. So that is it for my presentation.
Qui passe la parole au rapporteur suivant là?
Who is giving the floor to the next speaker, please?
Bonjour.
Good morning.
Está dando la palabra a Gala, de Transport, que nos presentaba las conclusiones del foro sobre el racismo y la extrema derecha durante la pandemia.
She is going to present the report. Gala, you have the floor.
Merci. Est-ce que vous m'entendez bien?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yes, we do. Good morning, everyone. And first of all, thank you to the organizers of the forum. Congratulations, because I think it's been a success. I will talk about the session of November 11, News from the Frontline, Fighting Racism and the Far Right During the Pandemic. We had a panel with Diane Abbott, British MP, Fabian Figueiredo from the Bloco de Esquerda, Portugal, Idoia Villanueva, MEP from Podemos, Spain, Mareas Piliotopulo from Syriza, Greece, Rafael Morales Dominguez from Las Desbandas, Spain, Ulrich Schneider from VVN BDA, Germany, Ursula Kuczynska from the Forward Foundation, Poland, and the moderator was Kate Hudson from Left Unity, UK. We based our work on the stories and the experiences of those who are on the front line in the fight against the extreme right. And the session allowed us to explore the strategies that we, as left-wing organizations, can use in the fight against racism. This collective approach that we insisted on is extremely important because of the health crisis and because of the fact that the extreme right is using the health crisis to its advantage. We think that scientific skepticism, withdrawal onto oneself, mistrust, fake news are levers that nationalist forces are using to propagate their ideology. The session was an opportunity to recall the strategies that the extreme right is using. One, the predominantly white, male-dominated right-wing organizations are really staging a crisis of masculinity. They're claiming that the white Christian culture is in danger. They are also, second, opposed to science, be it on the health crisis or the ecological crisis. Three, they are also putting in place anti-political discourses and claim that we are a danger to them. Also, fourth point, their economic agenda is profoundly neoliberal. They are advocating the dismantling of social protection and are in favor of deregulation. And then final point, fifth point, if with the election of Joe Biden, the extreme right has lost its main reference point in the racist international movement, it is still powerful and still has people like Le Pen, Bolsonaro, Salvini, and others. Question, what strategies can pro or anti-racist forces put in place? Well, we and the participants propose strategies on two levels. One, a direct ideological fighting, and two, the need to build an independent agenda with a reconstruction of social ties. The first set of proposals is the following. First, we need to deconstruct the discourse of the extreme right, and especially the populist discourse. We have to deconstruct the lies, denounce the inconsistency of their posture, and show their neoliberal agenda. Second proposal, we need to fight collectively against skepticism, especially in this period, through joint declarations, but also through popular education. We have to decipher the discourse and criticize it. We then have to fight against fake news and the fact that public speech is now monopolized by reactionary discourses that are becoming the norm. We have to work towards a refoundation of the media. We have to put an end to the commodification of information. We have to fight against the precarious nature of journalists and also denounce the fact that the media are owned by the dominant class. And finally, we need to work also for independent media. Fourth proposal, we need to expose extreme right-wing scandals, expose neo-Nazi networks, violent organizations, corruption, money laundering, and hate speech and hate crimes that these political organizations are putting forward. And we can here, for example, mention the ruling against the leaders of the Golden Dawn movement in Greece. And then final proposal, we need to carry out an analysis of the changes that are taking place, how these right-wing forces are networking and increasingly establishing their presence on the networks, particularly the social media. Now, we also need to support an independent agenda and try to talk to the public opinion. That means rely first on the dynamism of civil society. We need to, again, say that we should learn from the movements against the abortion ban in Poland or Black Lives Matter in the United States or the climate movement in France. We need to strengthen the structures that make populations strong and autonomous, develop the welfare state, schools, higher education, health, but also association and everything that creates social links. We then need to help minorities fight against the isolation of precarious people. We need to put in place policies that reassure the most vulnerable people and prevent them from moving to the extreme right-wing organizations. We also need to work on the history, recall the crimes that these extreme groups have committed, disseminate this history. We also need to multiply the possibilities to counter the hate speech by our speeches, show that it is possible to live well together, to build a society in which everyone can have a good life, and push these so-called utopian ideas. We also need to organize ourselves internationally and also at European level and reaffirm our common values. Finally, I want to mention also the No Pasaran conference, which is going to be held in spring 2021 in Berlin. And to quote Ursula, who attended this session, I will conclude by saying we must fight against the cries of those who are full of hatred and listen to the silence of those who have no voice.
A continuación tendría
Thanks,
la palabra
Gala. And now I would like to give the floor to Toni Barbera from Marea Blanca in Spain, and he will share with us the debate about the experience of the COVID-19 crisis, the future of health in Europe. Toni, you have the floor.
A todas.
Thanks, José Luis, and my greetings to all of you. The forum was very interesting, was absolutely relevant and necessary, and offered a broad panoramic, global and local view of the critical situation to which the COVID-19 pandemic has led us. Throughout 8 presentations and the subsequent questions and answer sessions, elements of description, diagnosis, and experience proposals were provided. To start with, a moving video from Comrade Enrique Ubieta, spokesman for the Cuban Brigades, was presented. It showed how the Cuban Brigades, driven by values of solidarity, responded to the call of some European countries during the first wave. In the same vein, speakers described the enormous efforts and generosity demonstrated by public health workers in the struggle to meet urgent health needs. The best information recommended would be the calm viewing of these 2 rich hours of recorded material, which are worth taking the time to enjoy, and I recommend it. We talk about, with experience and with honesty, of things that are so relevant to address this brutal crisis, of concepts and values that define health and health services, both fundamental for the left and in the model of progressive social, green and sanitary policies that have existed throughout our history. We are talking about inequalities, universality, each and every person, allocation for financial autonomy, history and epidemiology, markets and economism versus right to health, treatments and vaccines, safety and conflict of interest, future public in capital letters perspectives, work, occupational health and safety, international solidarity beyond Europe, and the ecological and systemic dimension itself throughout the process. We analyzed mistakes in diverse forms in the different stages and up to the uncertain present, initially because of ignorance, later because of the invasion of neoliberal policies in the different countries and in the European Union. And we talk about the international scene and the result of the US presidential elections were touched upon with all the pro-fascist reactions of the loser Trump and his threatening populism and doctrine. But proposals were also made that motivate our work and show us the light at the end of the tunnel. Learning and resilience to build a health model that corrects hospital centrism, green economy, universal minimum income and social rights, relaunching and dignifying public health, authentic citizen participation and co-management, industrial and local sovereignty versus the opulence of the pharmaceutical industry, and above all, in the words of the moderator Francine, the interconnection of everything everywhere as a method to address progress and hope in capital letters. In short, a rich debate with a wide and diverse participation that showed that even in something as complex and shocking as the coronavirus pandemic, we are capable of thinking, learning, living, and surviving together, each according to their ability. As a rapporteur, I would like to say something very brief that I don't want to ignore, and it is a concept that is very healthy. Dear comrades, health is to fight. And in 4 minutes and 29 seconds, I think I've done a very quick report, but I think I have been very disciplined, and I think that's good also. Thank you very much. Thanks, Toni. Thanks for your summary. And now I would like to give the floor to Stavros to talk to us about the seminar for a fair green transition. Thanks, Stavros.
Yes, hello. I hope you can hear me. First of all, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to present the findings of our GUE NGL seminar. It is entitled Climate Justice versus Climate Barbarism, the struggle for just green transition. So first of all, let me give you some details from our event. The moderator was the GUE NGL MEP, Mr. Kokalis, from the Greek party of Syriza Progressive Alliance. Then we had Mareas from the Greens. We also had Professor Dr. Ilan Kelman from the UCL University based in London, and Katie Treadwell from WWF, the European Policy Office, and Miss Leah Champong from Urtasun. So what we tried to achieve is to have people from politics, and of course, last but not least, Lynn Boylan, who is a senator with the Sinn Féin party in Ireland. And before that, she was an MEP for the GUE NGL as well. So what we try to do is to have people on board that they come from different fields, that they can actually contribute to this notion of climate justice, which is very broad, but this is very important for the times that we live, the times of the climate crisis. So a few more details about our event. The event touched upon thematics relevant to the climate justice agenda and the main challenges ahead. The European climate law, pandemics, and the climate crisis, just transition to the post-coal era, citizens' participation, and the climate debt concerning the global south were some of the topics discussed. We have to point out that climate barbarism is a term that should be coined to Naomi Klein, and serves as the opposite of climate and social justice. With climate barbarism, we see the climate crisis in fast forward, and without any doubt, as most of the speakers point out in the event, the very structure of our economy leads to deterioration and the diminishing of quality of life, and allow me to say life itself. Climate crisis is a social and inequality crisis. It is very, again, important to say that the Euro Parliament, as it depicts the people's voice in Europe, the Euro Parliament has an important role to play in terms of improving and changing to a more progressive trajectory the European Green Deal, which promises to leave no one behind, therefore integrating the social dimension. Furthermore, the climate law, which has recently passed from the plenary in the European Parliament, the climate law is important in many regards because the goals introduced in the climate law are binding. Another important issue raised was the eco-socialist approach to climate action and nature having a right in its own sense. Mainstream media focuses on small lifestyle changes, as well as the belief that we need to change capitalism to make it green and not change it completely. However, we need to look at the entire system rather than tinkering around the edges, as one of the speakers mentioned. We can do this through demanding the complete transformation of the energy system, making it efficient to deliver a just transition. This can be achieved by developing universal basic services that meet everyone's basic needs and not a universal basic income. In addition to that, we need to have an agricultural model in the EU that protects farmers and that encourages them to become protectors of nature. On the just transition side, to the post-coal era, which is another important issue for the frontline communities that now face the pressures from the climate neutrality goal, it was stressed by the speakers that coal is really carbon intensive and delaying the transition will not make it more just. So we have to rapidly phase out coal. However, we are still missing clear principles for what makes up a clearer transition, and we need to deliver a partnership and enforce it. These were in a nutshell what we have discussed in the seminar, but also we looked into ways forward to form new alliances and pave new roads of collaboration and new consensus. So first of all, we have to build alliance with progressive political groups and movements on recognizing the rights of nature. This can be done by allowing ecosystems to reach out to law, giving nature a voice in the Nature's Parliament, which is in the Nature's European Parliament, and allowing nature to recover at its natural pace. Second, recognition of the ecocide as one of the gravest crimes that should be punished. Third, stepping up the efforts against the replacement of coal from fossil gas by supporting the advocacy and campaigns of the civil society and social movements. And then last, forming a radical alliance between labor and environmental justice for a restructuring of the economic system to deliver for human needs and not for profit. Thank you so much for the time. In solidarity, thank you very much.
José Luis, perdón, tienes que poner tu micro.
Sí, perdón, gracias. Decía, le daba las gracias.
Sorry, I was saying thank you to Stavros, and next we'll give the floor to Connie, co-president of Transform Europe. She will have a bit more time since she will be presenting the conclusions of workshop and a seminar regarding the perspectives of the left in the pandemic. So she's going to present two different events and we'll have 10 minutes. Connie, you have the floor.
Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me. And I want to give you two reports, but both more connected as you can think in the first moment. The first, I want to discuss the strategic seminar, or I want to present the strategic seminar on the 14th of November. And this strategic seminar of Transform and the Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung take place every year. And this seminar is a space for discussion of current challenges, the state of the left in Europe, problems and potential of the left, and question of concrete potential intervention. The aim of this seminar was to deepen knowledge to the obstacles, to the difficulties around the transnational organization and cooperation on the left, and to improve the capacity of our forces for political action and organization. The cardinal challenge is how the European left can effectively intervene and promote a policy change considering the social, economic, and political consequences of the corona pandemic. How is it possible to, despite the limited capacity to act, to initiate a change in policy direction in Europe? The pandemic is an accelerator of capitalist developments and the consequences for the European integration. That was the first panel in the strategic seminar. And in this panel was speaking Walter Bayer, Heinz Bierbaum, Katharina Martins, Juan Carlos Monedero, Anna Mikola, Yorgos Katrougalos, and Maria Carmesini. We discussed the multiple dimension and the consequences of the corona crisis and their relation to the capitalist development. common ground of the speakers were that on one hand, the crisis revealed systemic grievance of capitalism and at the same time made new developments possible. The pandemic crisis accelerated global developments that were already present. These developments are complex and highly contradictory. The key demands on the left, such as a cancellation of the debt, suddenly became possible. And the question is it a chance for the left? Is it a change of the policy? Is it an open window of the time? And how we can use it as a radical left? We have different views concerning the measures of the European institution, and we discuss it. And the whole open question is, are these measures sufficient? Another problem is the state of democracy on the national and European level. It's a time of government, and it's a time of lack of parliamentary opposition. The parliamentarism is being partly undermined. Through the economic measure. The economic measures can be described as a return to the Keynesianism. And what we discussed is the role of Keynesianism concerning the social ecological transformation. What are the ways to go beyond Keynesianism and to change the system? What was also on the table was the question of industrial production. There is still no left-wing coherent concept for the left-wing European industrial policy, but it is needed when we think about social ecological transformation. And we have to think more connected with the trade unions, with the social movement, and also with the European foundations and with the partners in the political field. That was also the topic for the next seminar, what we had together with the European foundations. All this question of the European Green New Deal, the question of the measures institution from the EU institutions, and also the question, is it possible to overcome the triple crisis? That means the economic crisis, the healthcare crisis, the crisis of the social system, and the crisis of the climate change. In the third panel, in the strategic seminar, we try to find out intervention points, concrete intervention points. And so we present different projects on the national level. And the question is it possible to push such kind of proposals or such kind of project on the national level, on the next level, on the European level? How is it possible to Europeanize such kind of project? What we discuss in the Transform event with the European Foundation, with the Greens, and with the Green Foundation, and with the European Foundation for European Progressive Studies, FABS, under the title "It's Getting Hot in Here: How We Can Drastically Reduce CO2 emission in the European Union and eradicate poverty." That question was on the table in this panel, and we discussed it together with Aurélie Maréchal, the political director of the Green Foundation, and with the expert of the Green Foundation, Jonathan Essex from the Greenhouse think tank, United Kingdom. We spoke together with Ove Optenhögel, the vice president of the Foundation of the European Progressive Studies, and with an expert, Said El Khadraoui. And we described also from our foundation, myself for Transform Europe, and as our expert, Manuela Kropp, the project manager of the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation. We are agree in many points, and that is a good thing to know. At first, we are agreed that COVID-19 is a deeply endogenous crisis on the current production and consumption model. We have to change such kind of model, and we have to find ways out. We see that the current system destroys both man and nature. And what we also discuss is in which way we can dramatically reduce the CO2 consumption, in which way are possible. And we came also back to the question of the European industry policy. And we know for all of our foundations, we have no, in this moment, we have no coherent concept on the table. And what we have to do, connected with the trade unions. And so was it good to have in this panel also the representative of the European trade unions, Bella Galgocci. He took also part in our seminar. We have found new ways to bring together our different struggles, and we have to bring in more systematic way our knowledge and our expert in a new kind of networking. And of course, not only we as a foundation include all our partners, and of course, this left-wing think tanks also. I think we are on a good way, and we will continue this discussion in the next year in a deeper way. Many thanks.
Gracias, Connie.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Connie. I will now give the floor to Albert Klein from Progressive Caucus, and he will present the conclusions and the debate of the forum to address the issue of international trade between climate change and pandemic. You have the floor, Albert.
Bonjour à tous. Très heureux d'être là avec vous aujourd'hui.
Hi everyone, I'm very happy to be here today. On behalf of the different members of our panel, I would like to thank the organizers of this forum because this online edition was really successful. So I really would like to insist and thank you all on behalf of all the speakers that you invited in this workshop on trade. We had Léa Offray, who represented the BUC. We had Dr. Christine Riefa from a British University, Emmanuel Morel, who's a member of European Parliament from GUE-NGL for left, Republican left, and Mr. Muchos from D-Link, also MEP. As Pierre Laurent said in the introduction, we're facing a harsh time, pandemic, social inequalities, increasing inequalities, and climate change. And so more than ever, we have to take the right initiatives that would make a more fair future with more solidarity. So trade is pivotal. So we expect major political change to take over democracy and work on commercial rules. We have to use trade as a matrix to improve our usage of natural resources, to better share our wealth, to better improve the working conditions of our workers, and better protect our workers. We need to change our consumption patterns, as said by different speakers previously, and reduce our impact on climate. We also need to promote healthy food and food which is produced sustainably. We need to foster links with the countries that share our commitments and values. And we also need to foster, and it was said so many times during our debate, we need to foster a multilateral approach based on respect and solidarity. So Europe, if it's willing to do it, and that's a big question mark, actually, Europe can promote fair trade instead of free trade. Fair trade before free trade. This was a cornerstone in our discussions. So we want a new trade policy because a global pandemic has shown major health and social risks that we're facing worldwide. We want a new trade policy, but climate change is a direct consequence of our consumption and production patterns, also our huge waste patterns. We want a new trade policy, but at the same time, our health standards are facing environmental dumping procedures more and more toxic for our planet. We need a new trade policy when public resources are weak, low, plundered by unpunished tax policies. We want a new trade policy to regulate online purchases, digitization of trade, and the holidays are coming near. And so this weakens the protection of workers, the protection that we had gained years ago. We also want a new trade policy when the multinational companies working online make huge profit, they're exploiting workers, a bit people working in the 19th century, and they don't even pay tax. So it's an outrageous provocation for our citizens and for democracy. So at the end of this panel, we thought it was high time to radically change our approach on global trade. We're in a world with increasing inequalities, major health issues, and global competition, and wanted to turn the page and go away from deregulated globalization that plunders the resources and weakens people. So we want to create a post-COVID world, a post-globalization world, a more fair world with more solidarity, where we can breathe with more democracy. Thank you for your attention.
Gracias, Albert.
Thank you very much, Albert. I will now give the floor to Nikki Telgikau, and sorry for the pronunciation. And we will hear now the report on the EU budget and recovery package, social, green, and digital challenges in the multi-annual financial framework and Next Generation EU. And Nikki, again, sorry for the pronunciation of your last name.
Don't worry, it's just a difficult Greek name. It's Hilakou. Thank you very much, everybody, for your work. This online edition of the European Forum was a very nice opportunity that brought us together and gave us the chance to exchange views in this difficult period of confinement. So our webinar's topic was the social, green, and digital challenges in the next EU budget, namely the multi-annual financial framework, as it is known, and the European Recovery Instrument, Next Generation EU, and took place on the 18th November. Our guests were Rasmus Andresen, a Greens MEP and a member of the negotiating team of the European Parliament for the MFF, Mr. Kostas Mavridis, an SND MEP and the co-rapporteur also for the biggest tool of the European Recovery Instrument, which is the Recovery and Resilience Facility, Mr. Luca Vicentini, which is the Secretary General of the European Trade Union Confederation, and our moderator was Mr. Dimítrios Papadimoúlis, a GUE-NGL MEP and the Vice President of the European Parliament. So I will try to be brief and summarize the substance of what was said. The truth is we had a very long and interesting conversation, and we also got many questions. So this is only a summary, and I hope you get the main points. On 16th November 2020, as you might have heard, Hungary and Poland vetoed the multi-annual financial framework and European Recovery Instrument package over the rule of law conditionality, taking the entire European Union hostage, while a second wave of COVID-19 pandemic was stressing European healthcare systems to their limits. Public spending on healthcare gains nowadays an even greater importance, and the creation of a common European health policy seems more necessary than ever. The European Union is called to prove its core values and show real solidarity to tackle the escalating social and economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic has asymmetric consequences to different member states and groups of people, affecting mostly the most vulnerable and widening the already existing inequalities. It's now more than ever important to defend civil rights and the rule of law across the Union and accelerate the digital transformation in order to tackle digital inequalities. Overall, in the post-pandemic era, there is a growing need for more Europe, and that should be reflected in the European budget. However, is the European response sufficient? In what areas should we give or do more? SND MEP Kostas Mavridis stated he was satisfied with the progress in all green aspects in the Recovery and Resilience Facility, as well as the widening of the scope of the instrument, the inclusion of rule of law, but he stated he was worried that the assessment of national plans might result in macroeconomic conditionality and sanctions. MEP Rasmus Andersen recognized the big steps in the climate issues, but still found them insufficient. He suggested extra funding for NGOs working on LGBTQI+ rights, human rights, and the respect of rule of law. He also strongly supported the alliance of progressive forces in Europe to promote and stand for these issues, position we also strongly support. The General Secretary of ETUC, Luca Vicentini, welcomed the compromise deal achieved on MFF 21-27 and the European Recovery Instrument, but saw gaps in the just transition and social policies areas, specifically in employment issues, such as securing a European minimum wage, collective bargaining, and narrowing the gender pay gap. He warned also that by the time the recovery funds become actually available to member states, which is provisioned to be at least mid-June, they might be really insufficient to tackle the magnitude of the ongoing crisis. He suggested also the prolongation of emergency instruments, such as SURE and the guaranteeing of salary compensation during the lockdown across the European Union. To conclude, we have a lot of opportunities, but also a lot of challenges ahead of us. The review and, if necessary, the extension of all emergency instruments and measures should be examined with emphasis on health and social security, employment, monitoring the use of recovery funds, and the just transition. Thank you very much.
Gracias a ti, Nikki. Y vamos a hacer una pausa.
Thanks, Nikki, and we are going to have a break. And we would like to give the floor now to Dimitri Papadimoúlis, who is the Vice President of the European Parliament, MEP of Syriza, of our group. Dimitri is right now one of the political referents when considering the position of Hungary and Poland that are trying to, with what they are trying to do with the plan, the recovery plan, and he is defending the state of law. Therefore, Dimitri is going to talk to us about the defense, the policies to defend democracy and freedoms when faced with those people that are trying to reduce rights and freedoms, and against those who want a more authoritarian Europe. We know that you are making a big effort to be here with us, and therefore you have the floor.
Ευχαριστώ πολύ, σύντροφε Χωσέ Λουίς. Συντρόφισσες και σύντροφοι, φίλες και φίλοι, σας χαιρετώ από την Αθήνα που σήμερα είναι λουσμένη στον ήλιο. Αλλά μπροστά μας
Thank you very much. We'd like to thank you for invitation. Dear friends, we're facing harsh challenges nowadays and will be facing difficulties in the future because the current pandemic causes a lot of changes. And for the progressist forces and the left, it represents new challenges and new objectives. So we have to fight for our principles and values. We have to work to defend democracy because democracy is facing threats. We have to make more efforts to actually improve public expenditure. We need to better manage digitization. We need to give more options to the social welfare state. We need to fight against climate change. So we are facing so many challenges. You also spoke about the challenges of democracy. That's the respect of the rule of law, for example. You know, this is not something that comes just naturally. When the rule of law is threatened, we need to react because it could even disappear at the very heart of the European Union now. You have extreme examples, but you see what's going on with the government of Mr. Orban. So that's in Hungary, of course. Well, before his veto, Mr. Orban used the pandemic and actually got rid of the parliament, and he gave himself a mandate with no limitations in time, and he gave himself the power to work as a full dictator. So in Poland, they got rid of the right to abortion. And fortunately, thanks to the mobilization of the progressist forces, especially also at the European Parliament with the Greens, the Socialists, and the European left, who created an alliance, well, we could adopt a mechanism for the respect of the rule of law. So that implies a respect of democracy, because without democracy, now we will not receive European funding or grants. So these are threats. And the reaction is that we are threatening them to delay this package for their recovery, so they will not get the money. So now I think that the different people of Europe expect the money, are waiting for this money. They're waiting for this package, like Portugal, Spain, Italy, and also Hungary or Poland. So they're waiting for the money to reduce social hardships which are caused by the pandemic. This money will be necessary to fight the economic crisis, to keep up good healthcare, to fight unemployment, but also to support development and research to make sure we're ready if there is a new pandemic. So we need to react to this challenge. We're facing blackmailing. They're blocking the European people. Our reply to this blackmail was that, well, it was that if you think that we're proposing is not fair and right, you should go to the European Court of Justice. That's what we told them. So, because for us, it is not acceptable to use the European policies to achieve their goals. They're blocking 750 billion euros. So over in with the rest of the budget, over 1,000 billion euros. So this money must be there because it's necessary for the European people. So now the European Parliament has taken a clear stance. They're putting pressure on the Council and the Commission. And in the next summit on the 10th and 11th of December, we're going to ask that the Commission and the Council should give up on anything. They should not give up on this principle of the rule of law. So beyond this policy aiming at defending democracy and the rule of law, beyond this strategy to defend our rights, well, we also have to work in the framework of this Euro Forum. We have to work and organize discussions, and based on everything we said and heard, we need to set new radical objectives, progressist objectives. And it is now high time that the left forces, the progressist forces, come up with their own project for social and democratic Europe, a Europe that would better meet the needs of our fellow citizens. Of course, would have to set objectives that meet the needs of democracy, but that also help the rule of law, that face climate change, that reduce inequalities, and that face those consequences which are even worsened by the pandemic. The pandemic has also created more new problems. So, dear friends, we have a lot of work to do. Dear friends, we still have a long way to go to make sure that our reflections and thought that we had here in this Euro Forum contribute to our struggle, to our activities. We also need to set ourselves new radical progressist proposals that we'll share with Europe. Europe has to change to face the new challenges that expect her. Europe has to face, for example, they had to face the need for public support because most of the time, our investment is above 100% of GDP, but the Stability Pact sets the maximum, the ceiling at 60%. So the Stability Pact is on hold, but it's not being cancelled, it's just on hold. So we need to change the pact, and we will face new austerity measures in the future, and there will be more crises when it comes to the management of the debt. So the left and progressist forces have to demand a new regulation. They have to demand a new regulation to reduce the debt, and they'll have to demand that we get rid of the Stability Pact. Even Prodi said it was not right, and this should be replaced by a pact for development. And so when it comes to questions like the debt or other issues like sustainable development, democracy, and so on, where we need to find alliances because the left alone won't do it. It will not be able to do it. So, you know, the European left with the socialists, with the Greens, we are big, politically speaking. So we need to broaden our scope. We need to make social alliances to gain ground, to convey our ideas. And in doing so, I would like to thank you all on the occasion of this closing event for the European Forum, because we started the first event in Marseille, then in Bilbao. Last year, we met in Brussels, and this year we're meeting virtually. But we've been meeting amidst the pandemic, thanks to new technologies. And it shows that we can be optimistic. We can be optimistic when I see our capacity to reach our ambitious goals. So I would like to thank you for your attention.
Gracias a ti, Dimitri.
Thanks, Dimitri. Thanks for keeping the time, and at the same time, because you have shared with us many ideas. We are now going to go back to the presentations, and I would like to give the floor to Joanna, who is going to talk to us about the thematic forum, Global Warming, What Priorities for a Fair and Inclusive Ecological Transition. You have the floor, Joanna.
Okay, thanks a lot. I'll try to give a summary of our debate of the 19th of November, Global Warming, What Fair and Inclusive Ecological Transition. Our panelists were Thomas Weitz from the European Green Party, Jens Holm from the Left Party of Sweden, Christiana Gambarelli from the Young European Greens, David Sid from Catalonia, Inge Johansen from Denmark, and Asbjørn Val from Norway. Well, we're facing a multiple crisis: climate, health, economic, social, political, and food crisis. The roots of this crisis are usually the same: the endless economic growth and the ruthless exploitation of resources that are embedded in the capitalist economy. There is no doubt that a fair and inclusive ecological transition is what our society needs in order to overcome this crisis. During our debate, we tried to outline the basic aspects of the transformation needed in order to make sure that there will be not only a truly just transition, but also efforts for a systemic change and the shift to another social and economic model. Global warming that imposes the current climate policies affects, first of all, the energy policies. Reducing greenhouse gas emissions is an undeniable target. These policies sometimes are really ambitious, but in practice, they fail to meet their goals. A rapid and just transition in the energy system requires that it is brought under democratic control. It also needs to be clean, not dependent on fossil fuels, and to involve democratically owned energy projects in order to involve local communities in the energy transition and tackle energy poverty. The sector of intensive agriculture and mainly agro-industry is another sector that contributes to global warming. It is a sector that produces cheap food and impacts more on poor people. The environmental impact of agro-industry affects both nature and human health. At the same time, the rural structure is influenced as small and medium farms cannot respond to the structural and climatic changes. So many people leave the rural areas to search jobs somewhere else, and that usually is the case for young people. At the same time, agriculture can be part of the climate solution. Organic and agroecological agriculture can provide healthy food and also jobs. We need to support the community supported schemes and cooperation in order to achieve sustainable food systems. The transformation process needs to be inclusive in order to be socially fair and just. What we realize is that the public consultation in many cases does not work. The existing methods are not accessible and not inclusive enough. Especially young people and local communities are not heard, and people who are most affected need to have strong voices. Trade unions and the working people have also an important role to the ecological transition. The climate crisis has massive social consequences, as many jobs are lost, communities are destroyed, and poverty rises. That's why the core of the social and class struggle must include the fight against the climate crisis. The fight for a just transition needs to build on board social alliances, and the workers and unions must be willing to take action. We need active labor policy instruments to support workers to find new jobs in new green areas. As left progressive people, we need to take action to promote an economic, ecological, social, and feminist transformation of our society by using the experiences gained during the COVID-19 crisis. A fair and inclusive ecological transition will not be possible with the present climate policies, the EU's Green Deal, the EU Recovery Programme, and the EU budget. We need to avoid the continuation of business as usual green growth to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement. The European left, the progressive and ecological powers must describe their proposal for a new Red Green Deal and engage on urgent and concrete steps towards it. The transformation must be socially fair and environmentally sustainable, otherwise it will not happen. Thanks a lot.
Gracias a ti, Joanna.
Thanks, Joanna. And now I would like to give the floor to Angelina, who is going to present the debate, the workshop, Christian Marxist Dialogue. You have the floor, Angelina.
Ευχαριστώ πολύ. Καλημέρα σε όλες και όλους σας. Θα παρουσιάσω οπότε μια σύνοψη της δημόσιας συζήτησης που διοργανώθηκε.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. And indeed, I will be presenting the report of this public debate organized by Transform Europe on the 20th of November. This event was organized on the subject of Christian Marxist dialogue and how to achieve ecological ecumenism. We believe that this discussion is, of course, an important dimension of our work. We had this discussion in the framework of an initiative called the Dialogue Project, which is a joint project between universities, foundations, and various associations. This is a project developed by various university and faculty members who share, who don't always have, the same ideological and philosophical, Marxist or Christian backgrounds. It is the first time that we have organized an event like this one and involved Christian citizens and people who believe in Christianity. We believe that an ecumenical approach there is absolutely central in the current times, and it's important to look at the world as it is, but also to look at all these diverse initiatives that exist in society and then can lead to the world becoming different. I think that for that reason, this particular event has been extremely historically significant. And I think when we look at the world today, we know that we face the many challenges that have been mentioned here. We know that Pope Francis is trying to somehow change society, or at least is someone who wants things to change. And I think that gives us the ability to maybe join forces with our Christian brothers and sisters. In Fratelli Tutti, the Pope in particular says important things about the ecological challenges. And we know, of course, that the Orthodox Church here since 1989 has already established and decided that the 1st of September would be the day dedicated to the protection of nature. And it is important for the Orthodox Church to have a vision and a project of re-evangelization of the masses. We think that it's important to have this dialogue. We know that dialogue with the Christians is important, and we can see, of course, the differences between Christians and socialists. You can see that the church is also extremely diverse. You see in particular what is happening in a country like Poland and what may be happening in other countries, which can be very different. We think that attitudes are different, and we need to be aware of that. The church also needs to accept the fact that the role of women is changing. And we believe that we can have a positive discussion on these aspects. We believe that there can be points of convergence, even though, of course, there are major points of divergence still. And we should not just pretend that they don't exist. We believe also, and this is what was said in the forum, that our identity our identities are not always totally consistent and coherent. You can be a Christian, and that can mean very different things. You can be a socialist and also have very different ideas. So we took the risk of organizing this dialogue. This was quite a risky event, I think, and we felt it made sense to talk. You can be Marxists and a Christian, and you can still have this dialogue. And I believe that this is something that has to be said. We have to have the ability to talk and act politically, even if we have different opinions. As Marxist and left-wing people, we think that we want to change society, but to change society, you need alliances. You need as wide an alliance as possible, and that means also being open-minded and talking to people who may not be sharing our ideas, including Christian people in certain cases. So again, we need this sort of dialogue to continue, and we hope that that sort of exchange will be able or will continue in the future. Now, I mentioned the climate crisis. I mentioned also the fact that the church, the Catholic Church, the structure of the church is sometimes against us in certain cases, but we need to, as I said, be able to talk to them, not just refer to the individual responsibility of citizens. We need to change radically, the economic system. We also need to think about the responsibility of the elites, the ruling classes. And this is also something that Pope Francis talks about in his encyclicals. In Fratelli Tutti, again, he calls us to act. And this call is obviously a political call. And this is why there are really points of convergence between the message coming from Pope Francis and our ideas. To conclude, this dialogue does not intend to be just an endless discussion or just pure debate. I think we need to make that discussion more concrete, and that means taking concrete and practical steps. Certainly we need to broaden the dialogue, and certainly we need to be more able to join in a dialogue with other churches, with left parties, movements across Europe. And maybe we need to start working on initiatives, on practical initiatives, and cooperate with people that are actively involved in the field at grassroots level. So I hope this will happen. I want to thank, of course, everybody who is interested in this sort of dialogue, and I invite you to join in this discussion in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll now give the floor to Meritxell Serret, delegate of the Generalitat of Catalonia in Brussels. Jean-Pierre Michel has had some technical problems, so he won't be able to present the Culture Assembly report. So Meritxell will present the workshop that coordinated on the importance of sovereignty and municipalism in the fight against COVID-19, and will also present the proposal of the Culture Assembly. You have the floor.
Hola, muy buenos días. Muchas gracias por ofrecer
Hello, everyone. Thank you for giving me the floor, and thank you for organizing this European Forum and allowing us to share the conclusions that we reached together with our colleagues from Belgium regarding the first debate on the importance of sovereignty and municipalism in the fight against COVID-19 and its consequences. Now I am going to change and speak in English.
So the conclusions from this debate that we had the 21st of November begin like that. It's time for the change to overcome the neoliberal capitalist model that has weakened us as a society. The COVID-19 crisis has increased inequality and has made the structural weaknesses of our society even more evident. At the same time, the pandemic has accelerated the digital and green transitions, and we need to handle them under the perspective of social justice. In this context, it's time to consolidate leftist, progressive, and Republican parties leading local governments with new politics and new policies. The response from local governments to the COVID-19 crisis from a leftist and Republican vision has been to reinforce their proximity to citizens, to strengthen public services. In this sense, a good practice has been to build solidarity networks to help and accompany the most vulnerable people. And these networks have promoted and strengthened the sense of community. Municipalities are at the forefront of citizens' needs and must provide certainty and security to all. From leftist governments, we aim at building a community municipalism that focuses on the common good with progressive policies, based mainly on transparency, proximity, and empathy to all citizens. Is necessary to achieve a cohesion and a social justice. Municipalities must handle the challenge to keep social cohesion while not having neither adequate resources nor a say in related competences and policies. In this sense, it is important to empower local governments with more resources and a better coordination with the other levels of administration, so that their voice and concerns are taken into account in the framework of a multi-level governance. Leftist parties leading local governments must now rebuild their communities, which suffer from more vulnerabilities and weaknesses due to the impact of this transversal crisis. The main priorities in our vision for a reconstruction that guarantees social justice and resilience are the common good, rights and freedoms, culture, welfare, life, connected territories, and a cohesive society. We will keep committed from these local governments to build the future, to contribute to a global change from these leftist and progressive values. Thank you. And that would be the conclusion from the debate we held the 21st. Wrote from the debate about the Assembly of Cultures, the 21st November afternoon. And now I change to French. D'abord, il faut dire que nous sommes très désolés que Jean-Pierre Michel ne peut pas faire aujourd'hui cette présentation parce que devrait lui lire et partager avec vous tout ce résultat et de ce débat de ce jour-là. Je commence. Pas d'Europe sans culture était le postulat de la première assemblée culturelle du Forum européen qui a réuni 70 ou 70 participantes pour débattre de 3 thématiques. La première, les artistes, créateurs et interprètes et les travailleurs culturels intermittents sont des travailleurs à part entière. Et à l'Europe, son identité progressiste. Et le troisième, face à la crise des politiques migratoires et à l'influence croissante de l'extrême droite, pourquoi la culture est-elle indispensable? On a tenté d'organiser de vrais débats après de brèves introductions en insistant pour que ressortent de discussions.
Vamos a dar la palabra al siguiente compañero y luego, en la medida que recuperemos la conexión con Marichel, que vuelva a continuar planteando las conclusiones de la Asamblea de Cultura.
Je retourne, oui.
Bien, pues nada, Marichel, pues nada.
Excusez-moi.
La palabra es tuya. Muy bien, la palabra es tuya.
Merci, merci. Il y a un petit problème technique. Alors, il y a eu unanimité pour appeler la gauche européenne à remettre la culture au centre de ses préoccupations et nous exprimons le vœu d'être entendus. Au passage, je signale que le mot culture n'apparaît dans aucun des 3 autres appels du forum. Voici le texte de l'appel avec les propositions. Pour la culture, au cœur du changement. La pandémie du coronavirus plonge le monde dans un profond désarroi dans tous les secteurs de nos sociétés. Elle invite à une remise en cause radicale de notre modèle de développement. Les logiques libérales ont rapidement privilégié la question économique au détriment de la lutte contre le dérèglement écologique et climatique, au détriment des services publics. Les personnels de soins de santé ont dû faire face à la maladie dans des conditions extrêmement précarisées par ces mêmes logiques libérales privilégiant la rentabilité et la compétitivité au détriment de la qualité de vie et de travail. La culture est l'un des secteurs les plus atteints par les effets sociaux de la pandémie. La culture a été, pour des millions de personnes, un besoin essentiel pour supporter les confinements. Comme l'air et l'eau sont indispensables à la vie, la culture s'avère indispensable à la vie en société. Elle aide à combattre le racisme et la xénophobie. L'apport de migrants peut aussi être un enrichissement pour la culture. Paradoxalement, cette crise sanitaire qui a entraîné la fermeture des frontières pour les Européens eux-mêmes, industrielle et agricole et les besoins de plus de solidarité internationale, à commencer au niveau européen entre nos peuples et avec celles et ceux qui cherchent un asile. La gauche doit impérativement et de façon unitaire remettre les travailleurs et travailleuses de la culture. Il n'y aura pas d'Europe sans culture. Comme l'air et l'eau, comme les services publics, la culture est un bien commun qui ne peut être considéré comme une valeur marchande soumise aux règles de la rentabilité et du profit. L'importance de la culture, c'est celle qui rapproche, celle qui émancipe, celle qui épanouit. Elle doit être un appel pour octroyer un statut de l'artiste partout en Europe, qui donnera la protection et les moyens d'existence à celles et ceux qui souhaitent vivre de leur art et les reconnaîtra comme des travailleurs à part entière. Créer un fonds européen pour accompagner les politiques culturelles des États et des régions, notamment pour l'équipement et le financement des infrastructures. Inciter les États à consacrer 2% du produit intérieur brut pour la culture, afin de stimuler la création et la recherche artistique au même titre que d'autres secteurs tels que la santé ou l'éducation. Reconnaître la culture comme un besoin essentiel pour la santé mentale et le bien-être des citoyens en général. S'appuyer sur la culture dans la lutte pour un accueil digne de migrants et la lutte contre l'extrême droite. Et jusqu'ici, les conclusions de l'Assemblée culturelle du Forum européen 2020 du 21 novembre de cette année. Et merci pour tout y muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Maricel, por tu exposición y la superación de los problemas técnicos. Y tendría la palabra Vicenzo Colaprice para explicar el desarrollo de la Asamblea de Jóvenes. Tiene la palabra Vicenzo.
Grazie Luis. Prima di leggere in inglese la dichiarazione finale dell'Assemblea dei Giovani, vorrei innanzitutto ringraziare per l'organizzazione del Forum Europeo anche quest'anno, ringraziare lo staff in particolare che ci ha sostenuto molto anche per la preparazione dell'Assemblea dei Giovani, quindi in particolare Daniele e Piera. Per quanto riguarda l'Assemblea dei Giovani, hanno partecipato decine di organizzazioni giovanili ed esponenti di movimenti giovanili europei. Si sono registrati circa una ventina di interventi e chiaramente il focus dell'Assemblea è stato particolarmente legato alla fase delicata che viviamo in Europa, causata appunto dalla pandemia da Covid-19. Passo quindi alla lingua inglese. Okay, so the COVID-19 pandemic challenges humanity. The COVID-19 pandemic challenges humanity to quickly initiate a new development model that prioritizes the human security, emancipation, and the protection of the planet. Millions of women and men around the world are saying today, we want life to start again, but we want the world to change. Europe is at the heart of this challenge. It has been hit hard. Tens of thousands of Europeans have died of COVID-19. The drastic austerity imposed on public health system after the 2008 financial crisis has been paid with human lives this time. Today, millions of workers are threatened with poverty and unemployment by the economic crisis. Young Europeans have not been hit less hard by the pandemic. The youth unemployment rate has risen further in several countries. A generation that has grown up over decades of precariousness fails to see a future of security and stability. The right to study is threatened by difficulties related to distance learning and affected students and families. In all this, the growth of new forces from the extreme right destabilizes European society, and the impact of the pandemic also affects the mental health of young people. We need debates, projects, and joint actions to make a real difference. We need concrete proposals to the many challenges to carry them out. We need common spaces. We call on all available forces to join us. We are committed to ensure that a network is developed from now on, bringing together progressive, leftist, and green political forces, trade unions, associative and citizen forces, to find convergences and implement joint actions. We want to keep in touch for a new and mobilizing impetus for the future. We are not going to be another lost generation. Thank you.
Bien, muchas gracias, Vicenzo. Tenía a continuación la palabra Maite Mola para presentar las propuestas sobre los seminarios de la defensa de la paz en el mundo desde Europa y de América Latina. Gracias, Maite.
Bueno, gracias a vosotros y a vosotras. En primer lugar, voy a intentar, desde luego, sé que son 2 seminarios, pero ajustarme como mucho a 10 minutos e intentar hacerlo menos. Deciros que el informe del foro temático de paz y seguridad fue magnífico. Estuvo Caterina Anastasiou, Axel Rupert y Marta Martín del Partido Comunista, Transform, Rosa Luxemburgo, como moderadores, y participaron, que fue increíble, Rainer Braun, copresidente de la Organización Internacional por Alemania, Mina Tolu, coportavoz de la Federación de Jóvenes Verdes Europeos, Giorgos Katrougalos, diputado de Syriza y exministro de Exteriores de Grecia, Neoklis Silikiotis, miembro del Buró Político de Aquel de Chipre y ex eurodiputado, August Turkilmaz, miembro del Grupo Internacional del Partido Sol Izquierda de Turquía, y Petro Simonenko, secretario general del Partido Comunista de Ucrania. Yo tengo que decir que los moderadores fueron absolutamente excelentes, y luego las intervenciones fueron complementarias, pero también decir que hubo un desequilibrio de género el 5 de noviembre, el Día Internacional contra la Violencia hacia las Mujeres. Deciros que fueron las intervenciones, exposiciones apasionantes. Yo rogaría a las personas interesadas que vierais el vídeo en donde todo esto se explica, pero resumiendo muy brevemente por esta imposibilidad lógica de no perder mucho el tiempo, deciros que lo que interpretamos fue que estábamos en una lógica de guerra fría, sin respeto a la ecología ni a la soberanía alimentaria, en una Unión Europea que se militariza de forma continua, donde se disminuye el gasto en lo social, el gasto militar es muy grande, cuando hay que resolver los problemas del cambio climático, los problemas sociales añadidos por la pandemia. La seguridad no debería ser un concepto militar para la izquierda, sino cubrir las necesidades sociales, y la militarización, sin embargo, aumenta la brecha entre países ricos y pobres y crece el fascismo. La situación planetaria es muy compleja, muchas de las diversas crisis acaban en guerra, la OTAN es multilateral, no es Atlántico Norte, es Japón, Corea, Nueva Zelanda, la OTAN es exclusión, un país solo estará seguro si los otros lo son también, y para tener seguridad entre los países hay que aceptar la política y las diferencias entre los países, solo así será posible. Necesitamos una política exterior fuerte sin la OTAN, fuera de la órbita de Estados Unidos, en una Europa democrática con una política exterior propia. En este marco se intenta evitar la entrada de migrantes. Eso ya se ha comentado antes por el Pero no solamente hay disputas Chipre, sino también Turquía y Grecia, o sea, es tripartito. Por tanto, sería importantísimo acuerdos multilaterales y no solo unilaterales o bilaterales. Hay que beneficiar a la ciudadanía. Y respecto a la necesidad de salir a la calle, del qué hacer para movilizar a favor de la paz, en esa perspectiva mundial, hay un gran movimiento a favor de la justicia climática en muchos países. En Estados Unidos también hay un movimiento importantísimo contra el racismo. Por tanto, se trataría de combinar las acciones y unirlas en la medida de lo posible para conseguir cambiar este mundo que no puede ser. Por tanto, sería cuestión de combinar la paz con otras cuestiones, intentar la lucha contra el fascismo, trabajar con movimientos sociales a favor de la paz y no olvidar nunca el patriarcado, porque el COVID tiene una incidencia mucho mayor entre las mujeres, con un incremento grande, entre otras cosas, de la violencia de género, y además decir que las minorías, como el LGTBI, que la violencia ya es estructural y que hay que invertir para que haya igualdad y no militarización. Y termino con esta parte, luego voy a la otra, diciendo que sobre Frontex lo ha dicho todo el compañero inicialmente, pero decir solamente una cuestión, que sin matices hay que cerrar Frontex, eso es imprescindible, y traer las tropas a casa desde Siria, Afganistán, Irak. Y luego una cuestión interesante acerca de cómo alcanzar la paz en Donbass, que pasaría, por supuesto, con un diálogo y con ajustes constitucionales que permitan una autonomía en la región. Y ya por último de este panel, deciros que evidentemente el acuerdo de Dublín hay que rechazarlo, hay que respetar los acuerdos de Ginebra, y si la izquierda europea, las fuerzas progresistas de izquierda, deben encabezar junto con movimientos sociales y sindicatos la lucha por la paz. Es fundamental, si no, no podríamos hacer nada. Y como dijo el compañero turco que aludió al Che Guevara, ser realista, pero pide lo imposible. Y ya para terminar, me paso directamente al foro temático de ayer sobre América Latina y deciros que participó, claro, no nos ha dado tiempo, porque acabamos ayer a las 9 de la noche a escribir un relato. Mejor voy a ser brevísima. Desgraciadamente ya me gustaría poder ser más amplia, pero bueno, estuvo Bolivia, Chile, Perú, Colombia y Brasil. Y hicimos una moderación conjunta con Marco Consolo del Partido de la Refundación Comunista, y solo deciros que fue apasionante. La explicación del ex canciller Diego Pari de Bolivia sobre lo acontecido durante el año del golpe y el triunfo del MAS, que tiene una tarea ahora ingente para recuperar en plena pandemia la economía del país. La compañera Misiara Oliveira del Partido del Trabajo de Brasil, que nos explicó muy bien la situación del país en plena segunda vuelta de las elecciones municipales que tendrán lugar mañana, domingo, donde se espera ya un cambio en un país que sufre un aumento del racismo y la xenofobia y la violencia hacia las mujeres enorme. Y añadir que el compañero Claudio de Negri, responsable internacional del Partido Comunista de Chile, nos explicó el trabajo enorme que tienen después de haberse aprobado el cambio de la Constitución pinochetista, porque no se trata solo de cambiarla, sino de cómo cambiarla. Una intervención maravillosa. La compañera Giovanna Venegas nos puso al día de la situación de Perú, que desde luego conducirá a elecciones, sin duda, el próximo año, y hay esperanzas de una unidad, no sé si decir de la izquierda o al menos de las fuerzas progresistas. Y por último, pero no menos importante, como dirían los ingleses, Gloria Inés Ramírez del Partido Comunista de Colombia, en el 4º aniversario del Acuerdo de Paz, nos explicó de una manera clara y precisa que la situación es terrible, con cientos de muertos, tanto excombatientes como líderes y lideresas sociales, además de los muchos incumplimientos de los temas sociales. Fue todo muy interesante, las preguntas también. Yo os sugeriría que comprendáis también que hicimos un apoyo total a contra los bloqueos de Cuba y Venezuela y que hicimos un apoyo, por supuesto, a las elecciones. Yo recomendaría que vierais el vídeo y desde luego no quiero terminar sin agradecer a todas las personas que estáis ocultas y que estáis ahí trabajando a tope, que son las que hacen posible este foro europeo, y desde luego también a los intérpretes y a las intérpretes por el ingente y excelente trabajo. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Maite. Continuaríamos con Enrique Carmona, que nos presentaría tanto las conclusiones de la Asamblea de Sindicalistas como el panel por un nuevo modelo productivo en Europa. Gracias, Enrique. Y un saludo.
Un saludo, José Luis. Buenos días, muchas gracias. Y yo voy a empezar como ha terminado Maite, felicitándoos por haber organizado de manera tan brillante el Foro Europeo de este año con los retos añadidos que suponía la celebración de este evento en formato online. Comenzaré informando sobre la Asamblea de Sindicalistas del martes 24 de noviembre, donde contamos con 3 intervenciones que nos llevaron a descubrir la visión sindical desde el ámbito nacional al ámbito confederal europeo, pasando por la visión del Partido de la Izquierda Europea acerca de la situación a la que se enfrentan las organizaciones sindicales en Europa a consecuencia de la actual crisis. Desde Grecia nos informó Jota Lazaropoulou que la presión a la baja en los salarios y las medidas erráticas tomadas en materia de salud laboral están teniendo un impacto muy negativo entre los trabajadores en activo y los que se han visto incorporados a un expediente temporal de regulación de empleo. Esto ha provocado manifestaciones que han hecho aflorar la cara más autoritaria del gobierno griego, recortando durante algunos días el derecho de manifestación. Tras Jota, el presidente del Partido de la Izquierda Europea nos recordó la tendencia habitual de los poderes económicos a aprovechar los tiempos de crisis para recortar derechos laborales y sindicales, introducir reformas para abaratar los costes del trabajo y reducir la protección social. Heinz Bierbaum señaló la necesidad de dotar a la Unión Europea de un protocolo social acorde con las necesidades de los trabajadores y de la sociedad. Recalcó también la necesidad de cooperar entre sindicatos y la esfera política de la izquierda progresista. La secretaria general adjunta de la CES, Esther Lynch, insistió más tarde en la necesidad de contar con una presencia sindical fuerte en las empresas para atemperar la ola de despidos que se prevé tras la Navidad. Insistió también en que se busque una estrategia para que la afiliación a los sindicatos crezca. Concluyó pidiendo que el dinero del Plan de Recuperación de la Unión Europea vaya a empresas que reconozcan y negocien con la representación sindical y que la situación de los migrantes sea abordada para dar una solución a un problema de falta de solidaridad y visión global en nuestra sociedad. Entre las conclusiones de esta jornada quedó claro que es necesario que haya sindicatos fuertes en todos los ámbitos del trabajo, desde las empresas tradicionales y la función pública hasta los trabajadores atípicos y el trabajo en plataformas. Además, se constató que hay que revitalizar el orgullo de pertenecer a la clase trabajadora. Para ello, se propuso encontrar un espacio de trabajo conjunto de sindicatos y partidos de la izquierda progresista, donde elaborar estrategias sociolaborales por las que luchar desde el marco de la política y el sindicalismo. Todo lo anterior tuvo su reflejo en el foro temático que se celebró el jueves 26, donde contamos con una representación de alto nivel de líderes políticos y sindicales. Fue muy alentador comprobar que existe una sintonía alrededor de los problemas a los que nos enfrentamos en el mundo del trabajo y los caminos que podrían llevar a soluciones reales para la ciudadanía europea. Hubo también coincidencia en señalar los elementos que caracterizan la crisis producida por el COVID-19, estando todos de acuerdo en que son el resultado de aplicar los resortes que las políticas neoliberales han puesto a disposición de gobiernos y patronal. Hubo consenso en que si las organizaciones de izquierda progresista no desempeñan un papel visible y crucial en busca de una nueva sociedad, pudieran quedar relegadas para ser una opción que gobierne el cambio de la política que los trabajadores y la ciudadanía en general demandan. Se detectaron algunas tareas que deben comenzarse en el corto y medio plazo para asegurar tanto una visibilidad como una propuesta que llegue a la población europea. Además, se aportaron posibles caminos que llevarían a implementar algunas de esas soluciones por las que claman los ciudadanos, desde dar prioridad a los convenios nacionales o sectoriales sobre los convenios de empresa, hasta dedicar una parte de los beneficios empresariales a la construcción de una sociedad más justa y participativa, pasando por la reducción del tiempo de trabajo y la aprobación de medidas europeas para que un salario mínimo obligatorio dificulte o erradique el dumping social. Fue también muy interesante el turno de preguntas, donde se hizo alusión a la necesidad de seguir encontrando aliados que compartan estos ideales y también a las posibles implicaciones nacionales de alguna de las propuestas que allí se realizaron. La pregunta que lanzó un interesante debate fue sobre una de las conclusiones de la Asamblea de Sindicalistas: cómo crear un foro donde partidos políticos y sindicatos de izquierdas acuerden estrategias para obtener resultados tangibles. En conclusión, ambas sesiones dejaron clara la necesidad de trabajar de manera conjunta, siendo este foro europeo un marco que podría servir para explorar un camino de coordinación para las fuerzas de la izquierda europeas, dotándonos de una red global europea donde englobar un abanico amplio de actores que acuerde el camino hacia un nuevo contrato social y pudiendo tal vez convertirse en la semilla de una nueva red progresista global. Muchas gracias, José Luis.
Gracias a ti, Enrique. Como hemos venido diciendo, todos esos acuerdos y esas propuestas no solamente serán repartidos para todo aquel que se haya escrito, sino que también servirán de trabajo para el próximo año. A continuación tendría la palabra Cristina Simón para presentar las conclusiones de la Asamblea de Mujeres y algún que otro taller más que también será encargado. Gracias, Cristina, tienes la palabra.
Sí, gracias. A ver, bueno, hemos hecho 2 talleres y organizado también la asamblea, entonces 5 minutos para mí van a ser pocos, pero voy a intentar ir lo más rápida posible. Organizamos desde la coordinación de la asamblea, organizamos 2 talleres previos al foro, que fueron el día 30 de octubre y 13 de noviembre. El primer taller sobre la violencia económica hacia las mujeres y niñas en el contexto del COVID, se desarrollaron 2 paneles, uno sobre la situación laboral de las mujeres y el otro sobre la falta de corresponsabilidad en el trabajo de cuidados. En él participaron Alisa Abrar, de la Red Europea de Mujeres Migrantes, Elena Blasco, secretaria de Igualdad del Sindicato de Comisiones Obreras de España, Leticia Thyssen, asesora de política sobre igualdad de género en la Fundación de Estudios Europeos Progresistas, María Gramaticó, profesora sindicalista de Syriza, Marina Mónaco, Confederación Europea de Sindicatos, y fue moderado por Jeanne Ponte de Génération. Trató la violencia económica como resultado de las desigualdades estructurales que afectan a las mujeres, como la mayor dificultad en el acceso al mercado laboral, especialmente las mujeres migrantes, la brecha salarial, la mayor precariedad en los empleos feminizados, mayor flexibilidad en las jornadas, mayor temporalidad y contratos a tiempo parcial que los hombres, la brecha de género en las pensiones, menor acceso a prestaciones sociales, menor acceso a puestos directivos, sexismo en el trabajo, en la vida personal, y cómo la pandemia ha aumentado este tipo de violencia económica, porque las mujeres han sido las que han estado al frente de los trabajos peor remunerados, como el sector de cuidados, atención a las personas y el trabajo doméstico, ocupados mayoritariamente por mujeres migrantes, el sector sanitario y el sector minorista, los trabajos más inseguros y a tiempo parcial. También, mayoritariamente, las mujeres han asumido el teletrabajo junto al trabajo de cuidados invisibilizado y la educación de sus hijos, cuando las escuelas cerraron. Sin embargo, existe poco reconocimiento del trabajo de las mujeres en los sectores que han estado en primera línea durante la pandemia. El segundo taller es sobre la lucha contra las violencias machistas en Europa. Participaron Clara Alonso, del Ministerio de Igualdad de España, Anna Lukiewicz, de la Asociación El Sans Frontières de Polonia, Rosen Hischer, superviviente de la prostitución en Francia. En él se visibilizó dos modelos sociales confrontados, el del feminismo, que quiere situar los cuidados de la vida en el centro de las políticas, y el de la extrema derecha, que niega derechos humanos fundamentales a las mujeres. En Polonia, con la extrema derecha en el gobierno, las mujeres sufren una regresión de derechos y ven amenazado el derecho del aborto, que es bloqueado por un movimiento feminista organizado. En España, donde las movilizaciones feministas han sido las más multitudinarias de Europa, han provocado la reacción de la extrema derecha, que defiende los intereses que el patriarcado teme perder, ¿no? El movimiento feminista es fundamental en la defensa de los derechos de las mujeres para frenar, por un lado, la regresión y negación de derechos en Polonia y, por otro, poner en valor las medidas y acciones que se han impulsado en España desde un gobierno de coalición progresista y de izquierdas para paliar los efectos de la crisis en las mujeres, que son las más afectadas. En Europa existen muchas violencias silenciadas, las víctimas de trata y de explotación sexual, millones de mujeres esclavizadas. Urge, por tanto, dar voz a las mujeres supervivientes de la trata y de la explotación sexual que luchan para ayudar a salir a otras mujeres de esta situación y por abolir la demanda, que es quien la mantiene. Después, el 24 de noviembre, celebramos la Asamblea de Mujeres, que fue moderada por Charlotte Balavoine, del Partido Comunista Francés, y Cristina Simó, yo misma, del Partido Comunista de España. La asamblea se desarrolló en dos paneles, el primero internacional, el que participó Ani Raja, vicepresidenta de la región de Asia de la Federación Democrática Internacional de Mujeres y presidenta de la Federación Nacional de Mujeres Indias, y Liz Toledo, activista feminista de mujeres en lucha de Estados Unidos. Se trató la situación de las mujeres durante la pandemia en la India, acentuada por la división de castas en la sociedad, y en Estados Unidos con Trump y los movimientos de extrema derecha. También la ponente de India explicó la organización de los movimientos feministas de la India y sus principales demandas, en particular sobre la violencia sexual, y la ponente de Estados Unidos nos habló de las organizaciones y manifestaciones feministas en Estados Unidos y su convergencia con otros movimientos como el antirracista. En ambas intervenciones vimos cómo las mujeres se han seguido organizando durante la pandemia, cuando sus derechos han sido todavía más amenazados por sus gobiernos y cuando han estado más desprotegidas de las violencias. Las diferentes opresiones que sufrimos las mujeres se han acentuado. Por ello es necesario la unidad de todas, para defender los derechos de todas sin excepción, teniendo en cuenta las diferentes opresiones que sufrimos por razón de etnia, de color, de piel, religión, clase, orientación sexual o género. Sabemos que un paso que avancemos el movimiento feminista es un paso hacia atrás de la extrema derecha. Es decir, que en el segundo bloque fue un bloque europeo, participaron el Envidar del Partido Comunista Francés, teniente alcalde y responsable de Igualdad de París, Noelia Vera, de Unidas Podemos, secretaria de Estado en el Ministerio de Igualdad de España, Nina Ostanina, diputada de la Duma por el Partido Comunista de la Federación Rusa y vicepresidenta del Comité de la Mujer, y Angeliki Bisbiki, de Syriza en Grecia y activista en ayuda a las mujeres de los campos de refugiados. El Envidar nos explicó la situación de las mujeres en Francia durante la pandemia y el aumento de la violencia hacia las mujeres, señalando datos escalofriantes como el de un feminicidio cada 2 días. También nos explicó las acciones concretas contra la violencia que han impulsado desde el Ayuntamiento de París. Noelia Vera también nos habló de la situación de las mujeres en España, el aumento de las violencias durante la pandemia y las medidas que se habían impulsado con planes de contingencia para atender las víctimas, circuitos de atención de proximidad similares a los de París y especialmente una legislación para regular el teletrabajo desde una perspectiva de género. Nina Ostenina nos explicó los retrocesos de derechos salariales en salud, derechos sexuales, habiendo sido el país más avanzado en estas cuestiones. Explicó la situación de explotación sexual y reproductiva que sufren muchas mujeres en Rusia, que son vulnerables a estas explotaciones por su situación de precariedad de vida, y reclamó la solidaridad de todas. De todas las intervenciones se constató que en todo el mundo las mujeres hemos sufrido la pandemia del machismo dentro de la pandemia del COVID, que la desigualdad y las violencias machistas han aumentado. Por ello, estuvieron todas de acuerdo que la mejor vacuna es la unidad desde el feminismo internacional e interseccional, por la alternativa de un nuevo sistema que ponga en el centro los cuidados de la vida y acabe con todas las violencias que sufrimos las mujeres. Y se propuso establecer alianzas de trabajo y colaboración mutua con la Federación Democrática Internacional de Mujeres. Se acabó la asamblea con un manifiesto en el que reivindicamos una política europea de migración y asilo, incluidas las mujeres y menores que huyen de las guerras, víctimas de la trata y la explotación, una política que ponga la vida en el centro y no la muerte, en contra del rearme, la militarización de Europa, la OTAN y de una Europa fortaleza, un plan europeo contra la feminización de la pobreza, la precariedad laboral y la vulnerabilidad de las mujeres mayores, la creación de un centro europeo de desarrollo farmacéutico para abastecer a todo el mundo, un plan europeo contra la trata con fines de explotación sexual, mutilación genital femenina y matrimonios forzados, negar fondos públicos a los países que violan los derechos humanos de las mujeres, del colectivo LGTBI y de las personas migrantes y racializadas. La Unión Europea no debería invertir dinero ni adjudicar contratos a empresas que no respeten la igualdad de género. Reconstruir una Europa desde la solidaridad, el reforzamiento de los estados del bienestar y centrada en la asignación de recursos a servicios públicos que protejan y satisfagan las necesidades de las personas. Y para concluir nuestro calendario de acciones feministas europeas, el 23 de septiembre, Día contra la Trata de Mujeres para la Explotación Sexual, y el 28 de septiembre, Día del Derecho al Aborto. Gracias.
Gracias Cristina. Y ya la última intervención de relatoría correspondería a Axel Rupert de la Fundación Rosa Luxemburgo, que también va a hablar sobre un concepto de seguridad europeo de la izquierda. Gracias, Axel.
Yes, thank you very much, and good afternoon to all of you. And before I start, also from our side, big thank you to the organizers of the forum for the chance to have this workshop and for your great support throughout. Yes, I'll try to be brief given the time, and I'll share a brief overview of our workshop on how is security debated within Europe's left and progressive forces, and considerations for a new left concept of security. So the workshop took place on 25th of November, which coincided with the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. And this day reminds us that when we think security, we need to think it intersectional and people-centered. And this approach was also mirrored throughout the workshop's discussion, which made clear that if we are to address security and engage in debates on it, we need to think security holistically and ask whose security we are talking about when we address it. And to have this debate and conversation, during this workshop, we invited Heidi Meinsvold, who is chair of the European board of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, Walter Bayer from the board of Transform Europe, Dawit from the Podemos International Secretariat, Sarah Reeder from Agir pour la Paix, a Belgian peace organization, and Angelika Adensamer from Links, a new political left party from Vienna. What the debate showed is that current debates on security are mostly hegemonized by the right, while repressive and discriminating policies are justified in the name of security. This ranges from foreign policy decisions to law and order practices within the EU. The notion of security is thereby closely tied to nationalism and often referred to as protecting the national security against the other. So the debate made clear that referring to security can be toxic and thus requires careful attention when and how to address it. On the other hand, the debate showed that security is a basic need and an urgent necessity for those who are affected by violent conflict, police brutality, hate crimes, or domestic violence. And this context once more underlines, and this is also one of the core conclusions, the need to support transdisciplinary mobilization and deep organizing. Just name a few examples. Struggles for peace and demilitarization can be and already are linked to social movements and unions demanding redistribution of wealth, social security, and strengthening public sectors, including the health sector. Climate and peace activists can and already are joining forces to oppose concrete fossil fuel extraction projects and accompanying militarization and securitization measures. And those who step up for data protection, privacy rights, and against state and corporate surveillance share a lot with those advocating for the rights of ethnic and religious minorities who were worst affected by the undermining of fundamental rights in the name of counterterrorism measures. These are just a few examples from our exchanges that shows where synergies are possible and struggles interlinked. And as I said, this also forms one of the core conclusions of the workshop. Our take on security relies on linking and strengthening peace, environment, feminist, anti-racist, and privacy rights struggles, while this list is not exhaustive, that are all affected by acts and policies in the name of security. Moreover, participants reminded us to defend our language, to make clear that opposing current security policies does not imply opposing protection for those in need, and that engaging in the debate on security requires us to speak out on whose security is debated and what kind of security matters in people's daily life. The debate also showed the need to discuss and explain the difference between the left in social movements and in opposition compared to the left in government. It seems that the notion of security highlights this particularly. Finally, this workshop also looked back at a series of 5 workshops on the question of security and the left, organized by Transform Europe and the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation Brussels office over the past 6 months. And throughout these workshops, we discussed security through the perspective of different movements to better understand the challenge ahead of us. It became clear that there is the interest to discuss security from the left, and that we cannot shy away from positioning ourselves on what security means and for whom it is provided and enforced. And now, very in concrete terms, to keep this debate going and also stimulate it, we will provide a publication in early 2021 with considerations from these series of workshops on what a left concept of security should entail. And we will also continue offering space for transnational and transdisciplinary dialogue on the topic of security and organizing workshops next year, as we felt this exchange from different perspectives throughout Europe, bringing different movements together in these workshops was very fruitful. So we look forward to continuing this quite challenging, but at the same time, as we've experienced, very necessary debate. And if you're interested in that, you're most welcome to join us. And you can contact my colleague Katarina Anastasiou or myself if you'd like to get involved in this debate. And that's it from our side. Thanks a lot for your attention, and thank you to the interpreters.
José Luis, tienes que poner el micro.
Lo tengo encendido. ¿Sí? Bien. Como decía, dar las gracias a ACER y a todo el resto de relatoras y relatores que habéis contribuido a explicar los trabajos de este congreso en un esfuerzo de concreción. A continuación daremos paso a la segunda parte de esta sesión de clausura, en la que intervendrán diferentes referentes de las organizaciones que participan en este foro, y que también le daremos la palabra a Mónica Valente, secretaria ejecutiva de nuestro foro hermano, el Foro de Sao Paulo. En primer lugar, daría la palabra a Martin Schirdewan, copresidente del Grupo de la Izquierda Europea, Izquierda Verde Nórdica. Bueno, Martin realiza con dedicación y acierto esa tarea no fácil de conciliar la amplia pluralidad existente en la izquierda europea. Y bueno, nos va a plantear esa visión de cómo afrontar los problemas cotidianos que sufren hoy las europeas y los europeos, pero también con una visión estratégica que permita plantear transformaciones más profundas que las que actualmente pueden existir con la participación de una gran mayoría social. Martín, tienes la palabra.
Yes, thank you. Muchas gracias, José Luis. I hope that you can hear me well and see me well, because I do not see myself, but if someone could not, then I would be aware that you receive the signal. Yes, all right, great. So, muchas gracias, José Luis. Merci beaucoup, Pierre, for the facilitation of this webinar and also the introductory remarks. I also want to thank all those who presented the results of the webinars of the Forum of the Progressive Forces. Let me remind us in the beginning that today is the 200th birthday of Friedrich Engels. I don't think that I need to do any introduction of his personality. He was a very well-known friend, comrade, and also compatriot of Karl Marx, striving with him together for a different economic and social model, and striving for the emancipation of the working class people. And this reminds me very much of what we are discussing here, a different economic and social model. So the question is still a burning issue, and we are also discussing bringing together not only working class people, but the different progressive forces of the society, trade unions, non-governmental organizations, social movements, and people representing different political parties. Having said that, let me also convey best regards of my political party, which is Die Linke from Germany. I think the attendance and the interest taken in this Forum of the Progressive Forces clearly shows that there is a huge need in order to bring together the progressive forces from the different edges of the spectrum of progressive forces in Europe, and that it is not only necessary to bring us together, it is also necessary to figure out what common objectives we share, where we have some common grounds, and to lay out the trajectory to find a new path to actually act together and work together. Because only if we succeed in working together and acting together and putting forward our common objectives, we will succeed in the ongoing struggle of different interest groups in the society when it comes to the question of an economic and social model of the society, when it comes to an economic and social model of the European Union, means when it comes to the European integration as such. And having said that, I would like to focus on one question which I consider to be quite decisive for the time being. The question is, who's going to pay for this crisis? And by saying who's going to pay for this crisis, I do not only mean the health crisis with its social and economic implications. I'm also talking at the same time about the democratic crisis of the European Union. Dimítrios Papadimoúlis referred to the rule of law mechanism, to the ongoing struggle between the autocrats in the middle of the European Union against the democracies. So we are discussing actually democracy and the rule of law, which are threatened by autocrats in the middle of the European Union. We are discussing also climate crisis, or we are facing a climate crisis, which many of the contributions already referred to. We are facing a huge social crisis and an economic crisis all at the same time. And I'm not sure if you make the same experiences as I do, but when I, let's say, take a cab here in Berlin or in Brussels or in any other European city, for now it's a bit difficult to travel, but let's say I take a cab and I talk to the driver. And he says, well, I lost half of the income. I'm living off my savings. I'm talking to first responders or people employed in the medical services. And they are saying, well, we are literally trying to save lives every day, but we are doing this under terrible working and also living conditions. When I talk to someone employed in, let's say, gastronomy or tourism or culture, they are all facing the very same problems. They are facing insolvency, and they are not sure if they can avoid economic extinction. And this reminds me a lot of the last crisis, the financial and economic crisis, where the workforce, where pensioners, where so-called ordinary people had to pay the cost of the crisis by an imposed regime of austerity. And I do not need to get into the details because many of you already did who took the floor today. But we all agree that austerity, the model of austerity, has been proved wrong in the last decades. And we all agree, and this is something we really need to be aware of, that it was a conscious choice to impose politics of austerity in the European Union. This was not a random thing. This was no coincidence. This has been a conscious choice by political decision makers and decision takers, especially Germans. So I take this as kind of a friendly reminder and friendly revenge, and that Germans need to change their attitude, that there is no German translation or interpretation provided today. So I'm doing my very best in English, but let us be aware of the conscious political decision that austerity was imposed in the European Union on the member states, on the ordinary people, and that we are also facing a situation where we might be threatened by a continuation of that political decision, meaning that austerity will still be the governing economic and social model in giving an answer to the manifold crisis I laid out, I described in the beginning of my contribution. So what we need, from my perspective, from the perspective of the left in the European Parliament, is another answer, a major change, a new trajectory, a new path that we can take when it comes to the question of European integration. And when it comes to the question of European integration, we again are in the middle of the struggle of different interest groups about the economic and social model of development within the European Union. And we will only succeed if we succeed in bringing together the progressive forces. I think that this kind of trajectory might consist of two keystones, of two milestones. First of all, we need to enhance public investments instead of the policies of cuts in the public services. We need to invest in public services. We need to invest in the future. We need to invest in the digital transition. We need to invest in climate protection. We need to invest in order to secure jobs. We need to invest in order to secure the most affected economic sectors and by the crisis, most affected economic sectors. And the second point is that we need to generate new revenue, meaning that we are also discussing a new tax regime. The distribution of added value has to be changed by imposing a new tax regime, meaning that also big companies, digital companies, have to pay their fair share in order to implement legislature that provides us with transparency, with tax transparency, that we can tackle the problems of tax avoidance, of even tax fraud, tax evasion, etc., etc. These are the two milestones that I have in mind when it comes to a different economic model that enables us to also implement different social policies in the European Union. First of all, we need to enable the member states, but also the European level, to proceed with public investments, and we need to generate new revenue for member states, but also at the European level. The fun fact here is that all the speakers that are invited for this last panel, also Dimítrios, Papadimoúlis, Ernest, Urtasun, Jeanne as well, we are all working, Jeanne Ponte as well, we are all working and are affiliated with the ECON, the committee that deals in the European Parliament with economic and monetary affairs. So I'm looking forward to quite an interesting discussion right now. When we are discussing these two milestones of a general change of an economic development of European integration, I have to say that I'm deeply disappointed, that I'm really deeply disappointed by what the German Council presidency has presented so far. They took over the presidency in July. They started with big promises for tax justice, for tax transparency, and it was only yesterday that the German Council presidency blocked in the council an initiative called public country by country reporting, which would lead to more tax transparency. There's also the German Council presidency to be held responsible for, let's say, avoiding discussing the implementation of a digital taxation model for years now, but also for a financial transaction tax. And the roadmap presented by the Council and the Commission for the implementation of so-called new own resources, meaning also European taxes, like, for instance, a financial transaction tax, is so weak and so vague that we should and we cannot really count on it. We should and we cannot really count on the implementation of this so-called financial transaction tax, for instance, or digital taxation in the nearer future. So I'm really and deeply disappointed by the Council presidency. They are actively blocking progressive politics in the Council. And I also have to say that I'm deeply disappointed by certain political proposals, or most of the political proposals made by the European Commission, put forward by Ursula von der Leyen, for instance, when it comes to tackling the question of poverty or the problem of the social crisis within the European Union. Still, a fifth of the European population lives in poverty or threatened by poverty. And the proposals put forward when it comes to a minimum wage that should avoid poverty, or when it comes to the living and working conditions of platform workers, are also too weak to fight effectively and efficiently poverty, and are too weak to ensure proper living and working conditions for those employed by digital companies. So what we need to do here, and what I'm looking forward to continue the discussion about, is we need to rethink European integration. We need to bring together the progressive forces. We need to rethink the economic and social model of European integration, and we need to create together a space to implement these progressive forces. And getting back to Friedrich Engels, which I mentioned in the very beginning of my contribution, and to be a more dialectic here, we need to link a progressive vision, which we are elaborating on together, for another Europe, for a more social, just, ecological, peaceful Europe, all those topics that you dealt with also in the forum, but also a more intersectional and people-centered Europe. We need to link this kind of a Europe or European Union with what is possible, with what is feasible for us as progressive forces in the European Parliament, in the trade unions, in the social movements, and in also the non-governmental organizations. This is what people expect from us. This is what people expect us to deliver. And with that having said, I want to close my contribution. I want to finish my remarks, and thank you very much for the attention. I'm looking forward for the discussion with the colleagues from the Parliament and with all of you. And I'm also looking forward to the next year's forum, and the left in the European Parliament will actively engage in that forum as well. Thank you very much.
A continuación tendría la palabra Ernest Urtasun, vicepresidente del Grupo Verde, un pilar indispensable para cualquier proceso de convergencia europea, también un referente de la lucha contra los tratados de libre comercio que pretenden apoderarse de la riqueza del planeta para ponerla a disposición del gran capital. Ernest ha participado en todos los foros desde Marsella de una forma activa, y nos plantearía la perspectiva estratégica de una Europa tras la crisis de la pandemia. Ernest, muchas gracias, un abrazo, tienes la palabra.
Muchísimas gracias, José Luis, y la verdad que gracias a ti, a Maite, a Pierre y a todos los amigos y amigas que habéis hecho posible el foro en un momento tan difícil de organizar, en plena pandemia, pero en un momento tan necesario, ¿no? Yo creo que, bueno, llego escuchando desde que hemos arrancado las distintas conclusiones de los paneles, y estoy muy contento del nivel de discusión, de conclusiones. La verdad que me llevo muchísimas ideas de este foro, y creo que eso es un poco la virtud y la necesidad de seguir organizándolo, ¿no? El ser capaces de poder intercambiar ideas entre nosotros y dibujar escenarios y escenarios de lucha, ¿no? Yo la primera cosa que quiero decir es que tenemos en este momento una batalla muy a corto plazo, muy importante, y me refiero a lo que mencionaba Dimítrios Papadimoúlis antes, a la necesidad de romper el bloqueo de Hungría y Polonia al fondo de recuperación. Por primera vez hemos logrado, después de que la izquierda lo estuviéramos pidiendo durante años, un gran plan de endeudamiento europeo para hacer transferencias a los Estados miembros. Tenemos después, evidentemente, nuestras peleas con las condiciones que van adjuntadas a ese fondo, pero desde luego ese fondo es muy importante para muchos países y no nos vamos a dejar poner en el chantaje de tener que elegir entre el respeto del Estado de Derecho y el fondo. Queremos ambas cosas. Creo que desde ese punto de vista el Parlamento está trabajando bien, está trabajando unido para trasladarle a la presidencia alemana y sobre todo a Hungría y a Polonia de que no vamos a elegir y que vamos a tener ambas. Y en última instancia, si fuera necesario ir a una cooperación reforzada para desbloquear el fondo, los tratados lo prevén y eso podría realizarse. Así que no tenemos, y eso creo que tiene que ser un mensaje claro, y ni vamos a renunciar ni al fondo de recuperación ni al mecanismo de Estado de Derecho. Dicho lo cual, quiero hacer 5 reflexiones muy rápidas con los 7 minutos que me habéis dado de retos a medio y largo plazo que tenemos. Primero, sobre el fondo de recuperación. Tenemos que estar muy vigilantes que la inversión del fondo de recuperación no vaya en línea contraria a los objetivos climáticos. No queremos inversiones en combustibles fósiles, no queremos inversiones en energías contaminantes, porque podemos poner en riesgo el cumplimiento de los objetivos de París. Y eso es algo que tenemos cada uno de nuestros Estados miembros y nosotros en la Unión Europea que trabajar para que eso sea así y garantizar que sea así. Segundo, el fondo de recuperación no puede ser un fondo que capturen los grandes intereses empresariales en cada Estado miembro en beneficio propio. Obviamente, hay que apostar por la transición digital, por la transición ecológica, pero eso tiene que hacerse de la mano de las administraciones públicas y generando un nuevo tejido productivo también con nuevos actores. No queremos que los viejos oligopolios se apoderen y capturen ese fondo en beneficio de sus propios intereses. Y esa es una batalla que vamos a tener que llevar también en cada uno de los Estados miembros de una manera muy importante. Tercero, a mí me preocupa especialmente, de cara al año 2022, la reintroducción del Pacto de Estabilidad y Crecimiento si eso se produce. Ahora mismo está suspendido, los estados tienen margen fiscal para poder afrontar la crisis económica que tenemos por delante, pero ojo porque en 2023 los halcones de la austeridad van a regresar, van a intentar reimponer el pacto lo antes posible, a decirnos que hay que ir a una consolidación fiscal brutal con medidas de austeridad y esa es una batalla política que sin duda tenemos que dar. Las normas fiscales están suspendidas y no queremos que vuelvan porque han sido un elemento que ha empobrecido nuestras sociedades, que ha funcionado contra los intereses de las clases populares de Europa y esa es una batalla importantísima que tenemos que dar. Cuarto elemento que también se ha discutido en este foro y me parece imprescindible. Las izquierdas tenemos que ser conscientes y los ecologistas de que hay un ataque, aprovechando también la pandemia, pero que venía de antes, de regresión de los derechos de las mujeres y que pretende devolver a las mujeres en una tarea estrictamente reproductiva que las expulse de la vida política, de la vida económica y del mercado de trabajo. Y de sus derechos más básicos, lo estamos viendo en Polonia, lo estamos viendo en otros países. Tiene que ser central de nuestra estrategia poner la igualdad de género y el feminismo en el corazón de todo lo que hacemos hoy más que nunca. Y creo que tenemos que estar movilizados cuando ocurren situaciones como la de Polonia, pero también en Hungría y en otros sitios, demostrar y reforzar las redes de solidaridad que me parecen imprescindibles. Y la quinta cosa y última reflexión que quería hacer, que creo que también ha sobrevolado el foro a lo largo de la mañana y en los días que habéis discutido, qué modelo de Europa y cómo tejemos estrategias para la transformación del modelo europeo, ¿no? Y aquí yo creo que tenemos una ventana de oportunidad que no debemos desaprovechar, que es la Conferencia por un Futuro de Europa que las instituciones europeas van a poner en marcha. Nosotros no podemos abstraernos de ese debate ni quedarnos totalmente al margen. Hay que estar en ese debate, hay que influir, hay que dar ideas y si realmente vamos incluso a abrir, que ya veremos, pero si fuéramos incluso a abrir el debate sobre la reforma de los tratados, creo que nosotros como izquierda, y en este foro lo hemos debatido durante mucho tiempo, tenemos muchas ideas al respecto sobre cómo nos gustaría reformar esos tratados que en muchísimas de sus partes obviamente no nos satisfacen, ¿no? Y particularmente una de las cosas que creo que tendremos que abordar, y no quiero dejar de mencionarlo, es como la arquitectura legal de la Unión Europea, que va desde los tratados a su desarrollo en materia de reglamentos y directivas, aborda la cuestión migratoria. Y me ha gustado particularmente las conclusiones de los compañeros y compañeras del taller sobre esta cuestión, porque el Pacto Migratorio Europeo es una auténtica vergüenza y creo que en esa conferencia del futuro de Europa debemos ir con toda la fuerza a denunciar y a cambiar de raíz unas políticas que actualmente son totalmente criminales, ¿no? Bueno, yo quería dibujar algunos de los escenarios que creo que tenemos por delante, en la cual creo que la unidad y la convergencia de las izquierdas y los ecologistas será imprescindible y en el cual creo sin duda que este foro va a seguir jugando un papel determinante. Así que, compañeros y compañeros, gracias una vez más por vuestra invitación. Desde Los Verdes vamos a seguir participando. Hemos estado muchos de nosotros y nosotras en distintos talleres participando del foro y creo que es un diálogo imprescindible que debe seguir en búsqueda de alianzas compartidas para diseñar un futuro mejor. Gracias, José Luis. Un fuerte abrazo a todos y a todas.
Gracias, gracias a ti, Ernest, como siempre. Y a continuación tendría la palabra Jeanne Ponte, de Generación, que nos plantee bien en este contexto de la pandemia los trabajos para una Europa en común. Jeanne es referente de la izquierda en el Parlamento de la Unión Europea, destacó dejando en evidencia el sexismo existente en este Parlamento y dando lugar a un movimiento de trabajadoras del propio Parlamento cuyo objeto era denunciar cómo se normalizaban ciertas formas de violencia que se ejercían contra las mujeres en el ámbito de la institución. Y se planteaba mejorar el ámbito de convivencia y de trabajo en el propio Parlamento para configurar una correlación de fuerza en la que la vergüenza cambiase de bando y el acosador se sintiese acosado. Ha recibido el premio especial por la buena administración del Defensor del Pueblo Europeo y ahora trabaja en el gabinete del Comisionado Europeo para la Igualdad. Es importante tu participación. Jeanne, tienes la palabra. Muchas gracias.
Merci beaucoup, José Luis, et merci à toutes celles et ceux qui ont permis la réalisation de ce forum 2.0 possible. Alors, je ne sais pas pour vous, mais on est tous un peu fatigués en cette fin d'année. Et écouter ce matin les conclusions nous a donné beaucoup d'énergie, donc je vous remercie vraiment du fond du cœur. Qu'est-ce que cela veut dire être de gauche aujourd'hui ? Être de gauche aujourd'hui, c'est devoir faire un effort supplémentaire. Être de gauche, c'est chaque jour persévérer dans son être, comme pourrait le dire le philosophe Spinoza. Être de gauche aujourd'hui, et on le sait toutes et tous, ce n'est pas simple. Alors il pourrait être attendu de moi, ou alors il serait convenu qu'en tant que femme jeune, qui plus est, issue d'un milieu ouvrier d'immigrés, je vous parle des difficultés à accéder à certains milieux ou à s'en sentir légitime dans certains milieux professionnels, à devoir se battre 2 fois plus pour prouver sa légitimité. Et le monde politique, malheureusement, n'est pas exempt de stéréotypes qui empêchent les femmes à accéder à leur plein potentiel. Mais ce propos a été très bien expliqué par ma collègue Christina ce matin, que je remercie vivement. La gauche aujourd'hui doit faire face à une chute de l'adhésion démocratique, et cela a été dit et répété. Face à cette crise de l'efficacité de l'action publique, les citoyens considèrent que cela ne leur apporte plus rien. Gauche, droite, même combat. Europe, pas d'Europe, même combat. Aujourd'hui, j'ai l'honneur de représenter Génération, mais je souhaiterais également parler et prendre la parole en tant que femme de la société civile, citoyenne française et citoyenne européenne. Et j'aimerais apporter un témoignage sur mon expérience d'activiste et de travailleuse européenne. Sur nos projets tout d'abord. Je suis née dans la plus grande région transfrontalière française, un territoire qui sait ce que l'Europe veut dire au quotidien. Une terre d'immigration qui a travaillé sur une forme d'Europe sociale depuis longtemps, avant même que cette Europe sociale ne soit promise par l'Union européenne. Aujourd'hui, ce qui nous manque, c'est une Europe des projets qui ont du sens et des projets qui font sens au quotidien. Je ne parle pas ici de vagues idées décidées dans les capitales, mais bien de ce qui change la vie des individus. Suis-je protégée ? Ai-je les moyens d'agir ? Puis-je nourrir ma famille ? Qu'est-ce que je mets dans mon assiette ? Quel est l'air que respirent mes enfants ? Nous devons, si nous souhaitons nourrir le projet d'une Europe sociale, environnementale et progressiste, être facilitateurs de projets au niveau des territoires. Il s'agit d'une Europe des citoyens, au plus proche des réalités et non d'une Europe éloignée, d'une Europe nébuleuse. Je parle ici d'une sécurité collective au niveau local, mais pas d'une sécurité des uns contre les autres, mais d'une sécurité de la promotion et de la défense des droits des femmes et des minorités, de la protection de l'environnement et des postes de travail, par exemple. Et cela a été dit ce matin très bien par mon collègue Albert Klein, et entendre les communautés locales. En ce sens, les projets lancés par mon ancien patron, et il n'aimerait pas que je l'appelle comme ça, Édouard Martin, ancien syndicaliste et ancien député européen, prennent tout leur sens, en soutenant des initiatives au niveau local pour la mise en place d'une politique industrielle verte, durable et propre, qui sécurise des emplois qui ne sont pas délocalisables. Faire se réunir autour de la table les partenaires sociaux, les milieux associatifs et les mouvements citoyens est absolument essentiel. Avant de vouloir européaniser des projets, tâchons de les rendre possibles au niveau local, tâchons de les localiser, de localiser ces projets innovants, créateurs d'emplois. En tant que force de gauche, nous devons les faciliter, les soutenir, les encourager et encourager cette dynamique, mais nous ne devons pas les supplanter. Les territoires, qui plus est transfrontaliers par exemple, sont des laboratoires de bonnes idées, sont des laboratoires européens. À nous de les saisir et à nous de les promouvoir, à nous aussi de les écouter. Sur la manière de mener nos projets à présent, et tu l'as dit Rosé-Louise, en tant qu'activiste féministe, il y a quelques années, avec tes camarades, nous avons lancé un mouvement de travailleuses visant à dénoncer les violences sexuelles en politique. Ce n'était pas facile de lever un tabou connu de toutes les femmes. S'il y a bien un sujet qui ne connaît pas de frontières politiques, de frontières nationales, de frontières religieuses ou culturelles, ce sont les violences sexuelles. Il nous a fallu nous battre contre le status quo des institutions et leur immobilisme, mais aussi, et soyons honnêtes, et c'est malheureux quand cela arrive à gauche, le sentiment de toute puissance de certains élus. Immunité ne veut pas dire impunité. Nous sommes fiers, en tant que féminisme, d'avoir changé les structures internes à notre institution. Nous sommes aussi fiers d'avoir éveillé ou même réveillé les consciences sur ce sujet. Mais selon nous, notre plus belle fierté, c'est d'avoir mené la lutte ensemble, d'avoir agi avec solidarité et bienveillance, y compris dans les moments où la pression était la plus rude et où le risque de fracture était important. Gentillesse ne veut pas dire manque de fermeté. Notre monde politique doit le comprendre. Nous devons réorienter les politiques publiques dont le premier rôle doit être de prendre soin des individus. Cessons les politiques d'austérité budgétaire, cela a été dit à de nombreuses reprises ce matin, mais cessons également les politiques d'austérité du cœur. Il en va de nos solidarités et de notre sentiment collectif d'humanité. Le destin d'une femme polonaise et le recul de ses droits est intrinsèquement lié à mon destin à moi de femme française. Dans ce monde qui nous dépasse, à la digitalisation et à la marchandisation, nous devons mener une révolution du sensible. Nous ne sommes pas remplaçables. La société du mépris et de l'indivisibilité doivent laisser la place à une manière nouvelle de faire politique. C'est ce qui en va de notre santé démocratique et de notre crédibilité en tant que force progressiste. Simplifions notre propos et incarnons-nous dans une gauche du réel. Je vous remercie de m'avoir écouté.
Gracias a ti, Jeanne. Y continuamos la exposición con la palabra correspondiente a Julie Steendam, que es coordinadora europea de la iniciativa para el derecho a la curación, una campaña legislativa iniciada por profesionales de la medicina y expertos en salud pública de 9 países de Europa, que quiere conseguir 1 millón de firmas para que la Comisión Europea tome las medidas necesarias para que las vacunas y los productos farmacéuticos relacionados con el COVID-19 estén disponibles para toda la población de una manera gratuita. Julie vive en Bélgica y es parte activa de los movimientos de solidaridad internacional. Bienvenida, Julie, a este foro, que espera con ansiedad escuchar tu propuesta. Muchas gracias. Tienes la palabra.
Thank you, José Luis, and hello to everyone. Thanks for inviting us and giving us the chance to present this initiative, which I think is of big importance. As we saw during the past weeks, during all the panels, we heard and understood that all over Europe, both health systems, social security is under big pressure to face its health crisis, the pandemic, and the related social economical impacts of it. But at the same time, we see that private companies are still trying to make a benefit of the whole situation, and that the European Commission is not doing enough or even enabling them to do so. I think one of the most concerning or worrisome examples is the role that the big pharmaceutical companies are playing right now. And that's why I'm very happy to introduce you or present you an initiative that will be launched next Monday. This is a European Citizens Initiative called Right to Cure. And the European Citizens Initiative is an official tool agreed upon by the Commission that allows citizens to introduce legislative proposals directly to the Commission. The only condition, and it's not a small one, is that we need to obtain 1 million signatures from at least from European citizens. So this is what we will try to do starting from Monday. And the initiative that we, a group of 11 doctors, public health experts from 9 different countries in the European Union introduced, is to demand the European Commission to put everything in place to make sure that intellectual property rights do not limit the access to necessary vaccines and pharmaceutical treatments against COVID-19. Because we see that the role that the European Commission is playing right now is not exactly what we need or is not going far enough. From one side, we saw at the beginning of the pandemic that the Commission took a leading role. They declared that they will fund the research, the production, the development of vaccines with public money, which is a good thing, and that once the vaccine is developed, it should be a public common good. This is amazing. But now the last weeks, we saw that those pharmaceutical companies are declaring that they found a vaccine, but that they are not putting those promises in place. The European Commission is doing the negotiations to buy those vaccines, to deliver them to the countries, but they are not guaranteeing or not giving us any guarantees on the pricing of this. Above this, all those negotiations are being held behind closed doors. So from one side, we are putting lots of public money in the development and research of these pharmaceutical products, but we're not getting any public control over them. We don't know how much the production costs are of these vaccines. We don't know how much our health systems, social security, or even individuals will have to pay for them. We have no clue how much doses we will have, how many people will be protected and when. And this is not even to mention countries or peoples outside of Europe. So we really risk right here to paying with our public money that is needed to combat this crisis, the health crisis, the social economical crisis. You're risking to give those money away to the profits of pharmaceutical companies from one hand, and not getting the guarantee on the safety and the fast production and distribution of those pharmaceutical products to all over the world, which is of course needed or is one of these solutions to get out of the pandemic that we are facing right now. So what we are doing right now as this European Citizens Initiative is already building a big coalition. So this is a very specific call to everyone that is listening and is attending this forum, is to join the coalition that we are starting. We already have a big group of European health experts, doctors, trade unions, activist groups, movements, and so on, health mutualities, NGOs, that give their support to the campaign and agreed to actively help us to collect those 1 million signatures in the fastest time possible. But we really want to make a big and large coalition. So this is my call to you to join and help us get those signatures and to help us launch this starting from Monday and making sure we get those 1 million signatures even faster than 1 year, so we can really put pressure on the European Commission to make those vaccines and treatments a freely accessible public good. This is mainly what I wanted to say. I think right now we are in a situation that the public need and public support for accessible medication and also to resist the private profiteering from pharmaceutical companies has never been this big. We have a really opportunity to win this, to force the European Commission to make the vaccines a freely public good. So, but we need to realize it. So I'm asking you to support it, to share starting from Monday from our website that we will launch. It will be noprofitonpandemic.eu to make people sign, to collect the signatures all over Europe and help us to fight this crisis and not contribute to the pharmaceutical companies' profit. Many thanks.
Gracias a ti, Julie. Y como no, en la declaración final y el plan de acción contemplaremos el apoyo a la campaña que nos ha presentado. Bien, finalmente en este apartado, antes de que Pierre entre en la declaración final, daría la palabra a Mónica Valente, secretaria ejecutiva del Foro de Sao Paulo, como decía antes nuestro hermano mayor. Bien, yo decir de Mónica que su trabajo ha sido fundamental para afrontar... Sí, Mónica, estaba presentándote como una referencia que tu trabajo ha sido fundamental para esa etapa compleja que ha vivido América Latina en la etapa de Trump, afortunadamente por concluir, donde se ha recuperado la doctrina Monroe y donde ha habido agresiones de todo tipo para acabar con los gobiernos progresistas. No es casualidad que el propio presidente de los Estados Unidos situara al Foro de Sao Paulo como uno de sus enemigos y a ti concretamente como una también de sus ataques más frontales. Pero también has tenido que sufrir en tu país los ataques de la extrema derecha, de ese gobierno que esperemos mañana sufra una derrota en las elecciones municipales. Gracias, Mónica, por tu disposición, para tu esfuerzo, a pesar del cambio horario, para participar en este foro, que Vito, con toda modestia, pues está intentando caminar junto con otras plataformas unitarias para construir ese mundo tras la pandemia, que es un mundo más justo y más social. Mónica tiene la palabra. Un abrazo.
Grande abraço a você, José Luís, e muito obrigada por suas palavras tão generosas para comigo. Eu vou, conforme solicitado, eu vou falar sobre as ações do Foro de São Paulo face à pandemia e uma possibilidade de cooperação entre o Foro de São Paulo e o Fórum Europeu. Queridos companheiros, queridas companheiras, é com muita alegria e honra que participo como secretária executiva do Foro de São Paulo dessa sessão de encerramento do Fórum Europeu de 2020, um espaço para vozes de esquerda, verdes e progressistas, discutirem soluções alternativas para as crises que a Europa enfrenta. Eu tomei conhecimento do temário que vocês tiveram a oportunidade de debater, como o tema da pandemia, da economia no mundo, das mudanças climáticas, da segurança global e da paz mundial, da solidariedade, do novo modelo de produção e trabalho, da violência contra as mulheres. Eu digo-lhes que não são temas e desafios apenas europeus, mas de toda a humanidade. Hoje o mundo vive uma grave crise de múltiplas dimensões, uma crise econômica, social e política, agravada pela pandemia do Covid-19. O ano de 2020 é o ano em que o capitalismo, com suas políticas neoliberais, mostrou seu fracasso como um modelo econômico e social. Além de milhões de enfermos e milhares de mortos, pessoas que as políticas neoliberais não conseguem cuidar nem curar, cresce no mundo a fome, a pobreza e o desemprego. A paz segue ameaçada e o meio ambiente segue sendo destruído, comprometendo a vida das futuras gerações. Nunca foi tão importante construir saídas unitárias a esses desafios tão complexos para a humanidade. Nós, do Foro de São Paulo, que somos uma articulação de partidos políticos latino-americanos e caribenhos, anti-imperialistas e anti-neoliberais, acreditamos nos princípios da solidariedade, da paz, da cooperação e da integração, para construir caminhos para recuperar e atingir o desenvolvimento econômico com justiça social e recuperar a plena soberania de nossos países e povos. Nesses tempos de pandemia, levando em conta essas realidades, nós consideramos que o Covid-19 constitui um desafio global, que não distingue fronteiras, ideologias ou níveis de desenvolvimento. Que para enfrentar a dimensão da crise atual, são necessárias solidariedade, integração e cooperação internacional para além das diferenças políticas. Que a vida e a saúde das pessoas devem ter prioridade sobre o mercado e, portanto, é fundamental definir políticas nacionais que garantam a soberania e a segurança alimentar dos nossos povos. Que se confirme a necessidade de priorizar permanentemente o investimento na saúde pública, assumindo esse serviço como um direito do ser humano e não uma mercadoria. Que os efeitos da pandemia causada pelo novo coronavírus foram especialmente cruéis para as mulheres, que na América Latina e o Caribe são a maioria das trabalhadoras da saúde, chefiam grande parte dos lares em nossa América e representam 60% da força de trabalho no setor informal e autônomo. Que o neoliberalismo demonstrou mais uma vez o seu fracasso como modelo social e que a atuação dirigente e efetiva do Estado, em função dos interesses nacionais e da proteção dos mais vulneráveis, é essencial. Dessa maneira, em nossa reunião de maio de 2020, nós aprovamos as seguintes diretrizes. Primeiro, apoiar a proposta do secretário-geral das Nações Unidas, Antônio Guterres, de declarar cessar-fogo em todos os conflitos em escala universal e unir esforços para enfrentar a Covid-19. Apoiar a criação de um Fundo Humanitário Internacional que sirva de base para o enfrentamento da pandemia e contribua para o financiamento da aquisição de exames diagnósticos, medicamentos necessários e vacinas. E que as vacinas, quando descobertas, sejam gratuitas. Que, portanto, que governos e instituições financeiras internacionais tomem decisões rápidas para atender a essas necessidades. Convocar organizações multilaterais em nível regional e internacional, governo, forças políticas, movimentos sociais, populares e solidários, para exigir e fazer com que os governos nacionais priorizem a atenção aos mais vulneráveis da sociedade, as principais vítimas da Covid-19, cumprindo as orientações da OMS, respeitando e reconhecendo o seu trabalho. Nós apoiamos o multilateralismo e a cooperação internacional contra o unilateralismo, como instrumentos essenciais para o enfrentamento da Covid-19. Exigimos o fortalecimento do papel do Estado na implementação de ações que garantam a todos os seus cidadãos igual acesso aos serviços de saúde. Da mesma forma, apoiamos as medidas adotadas para a recuperação econômica que não afetem a proteção da população, nem aumentem o hiato econômico e social. E ainda apoiamos a proposta da ONU para a criação e implementação da renda básica universal. Exigimos o fim das medidas econômicas e sanções coercitivas unilaterais contra Nicarágua e Venezuela, bem como do bloqueio genocida a Cuba, que ameaçam o bem-estar e a segurança e a paz dos povos, especialmente frente à pandemia. E defendemos a proclama da CELAC da América Latina como zona de paz para garantir a estabilidade da região, como condição essencial para ações conjuntas de enfrentamento à Covid-19. Nós acreditamos que, em torno dessas bandeiras, podemos construir uma grande unidade de ação entre o Foro de São Paulo e o Fórum Europeu, porque a pandemia e a crise mundial estão longe de acabar e nós precisamos lutar juntos para garantir a vida, a saúde, o bem-estar e a paz da humanidade. Muito obrigada por essa oportunidade e parabéns ao Fórum Europeu. Um grande abraço.
Gracias a ti, Mónica, y un abrazo para todas las amigas y amigos latinoamericanos. Bien, con la intervención de Mónica terminaba esta segunda parte y pasaríamos a la intervención final de presentación de la declaración final y del plan de acción. Para la primera parte le daría la palabra a Pierre Logan, vicepresidente del Partido de la Izquierda Europea, coordinador de este foro, que nos va a presentar la declaración que trata de ofrecer una plataforma a los pueblos europeos, una plataforma de esperanza y de lucha. Pierre, senador de la República Francesa, nos presenta.
And we are going to see this effort of all of us who are working together in favor of this convergence, and we are trying to go against the right-wing political forces. You have the floor.
Merci beaucoup, José Luis. Donc, je suis chargé, en conclusion, de vous présenter la déclaration.
Well, thank you, José Luis. I'm in charge of making a presentation of the final declaration. I have to say a few words on the future prospects of the forum. And before I start this presentation, I would like to thank you, Monica, because we remember that the Sao Paulo Forum was a great source of inspiration for us for the creation of the European Forum. And I hope that we'll keep working together in the future. We'll work even closer together because it is essential. It is essential because the problem we're facing today are international problems. I'm not going to read the text of the final declaration because all the participants have received it. Everybody has received it before these events start this morning. But I would like to comment the text shortly. First, we wanted to make this a short declaration so that everybody could use it everywhere, and it will go in hand with the action plan that will be submitted by José Luis after me. Now, of course, what I meant to say here is that all the reports that were presented, all those ideas that were shared in the reports are actually fully part of the findings and conclusions of the forum. So all these ideas together are important. And this is what we'll have to work on and to get something more concrete. I would like to add something. Well, Ernest made a very important observation a few minutes back. We're now starting a phase when the future of Europe will be questioned. The future of Europe will be discussed again. And as a forum, with all the forces of the left, we'll have to take our share in the discussions. We'll have to be there and ready to take action to renegotiate the European treaties. We see that these treaties are not fit to help Europe face the challenges of health, of the environment, the climate, the human challenges either. And as we said, we're facing a pandemic, which is creating a new challenge for humanity. We need to create a new type of development, which is so true for Europe. And this idea is present in the entire final declaration that we're adopting. So through the reports, we've tackled many themes. We've spoken about human security, which is a priority, health and healthcare. It's all about protecting work. It's about promoting work, and it's about migration. It's about women's rights, as said, women's rights are really under attack these days in Europe. And what is also at stake is the protection of our planet. And the final declaration demands an ambitious transition plan, a plan that should be fair, but that should move forward and fast, because we don't have much time left to protect our planet against climate change. Then, what is at stake when it comes to human security and the protection of planet Earth becomes a single struggle for a new type of global development. The conclusions of the conference on trade with Albert's presentation they're very important. We are struggling to defend public services for a new productive model, and we know there's still a long way to go when it comes to those matters. We need to reconcile social stakes and a new production model. It's all about solidarity in all fields, and we need to go against the rationale of competition and division. We need to go against nationalistic hatred. We need to go against any rationale that will prevent us from working together and be useful for human good. And finally, it's all about peace and security, which has been explained in the presentation made by Maite. This is something that was very much present in the international dimension of our forum. Our declaration what was presented by José Luis will show what we need to do, this struggle for the vaccine. Also, we need to work to give a new usage of these hundreds of millions of euros tabled in the EU. Now we need to make sure that this money is used for a social struggle for the environment. We need to change the rules on how we use money in the EU. We need to change the rules of the European Central Bank. We need to put an end to the Stability Pact. You need to reopen a debate on the debt to avoid facing new austerity policies again. Also, we want to be part of the current debate on public liberties, the fight against racism and the far right in Europe. After this event, well, after I speak, I have to leave because I need to join a big demonstration to defend public freedoms in France this weekend, because we're facing so many attacks, including in our country. You know, we spoke about Hungary, Poland, what are very violent attacks. But even in a country like France, there are many attacks on democracy. So we need to fight to defend public liberty and freedoms. And Jean-Pierre said it before. This is a dimension that we'll have to reinforce in the future, and especially in the final declaration, to be up to what is expected from us. Women's rights are important also. We've mentioned them. And then there is direct struggle next to women in Poland. We need to support them, and it's important. But this is something that is fully integrated in the struggle that we need to carry out in the EU member states. And then there are different struggles to reinforce our links between us in our forum with all the international struggles around the world. We have close links with the Sao Paulo Forum, but there are other regions in the world where those struggles must be carried out. We know that there are struggles to provide more security in the Mediterranean. We know that we need to keep working with the democratic forces in the south, on the south shore of the Mediterranean, in the Middle East, in Africa, because they're also facing huge environmental, health, and democratic challenges. We need to work with our people and friends in North America. At the beginning of the forum, we could count on the presence of a representative of the new forces of the left in the United States. So all this is very important, and we have to move on with this. Now, our ambition is twofold. We need to prepare the next forum, and we hope that the next forum will take place physically, someplace, somewhere where we can hug each other, shake our hands and speak face to face and not through a screen. We had considered organizing the forum in Athens and it was not possible. So maybe we'll be able to organize the next one in Athens if our comrades are still available there. And I think they are. But this is our truest wish, dearest wish. We'd like to prepare the next forum in a different situation. But there's a second thing I'd like to say. This is a year of struggle. This is a year that we need to battle to prepare the next forum. We just should not limit ourselves to making an appointment for next year, because this is the subject of our final declaration that we'll now publish. This is the summary of what we said today, but this is also the subject of the action plan. This action plan could provide rhythm to what we do in the coming months. And José Luis is actually going to make a presentation about it. This is a list of actions that we need to carry out for our common good, for what we need to do together in the year to come. Something which is a plan that we need to turn into a common action with all our forces to actually move forward and be better by the next forum. José Luis, I will give you back the floor and you will round off this session with a presentation of the different calendar and the different dates in our calendar for the action plan.
Thanks, Pierre. This fourth forum wants to make a proposal together with a declaration and action plan for European peoples to defend a way out of the crisis that is more social and more fair and fairer. And we want to, with the different panels and different groups, we would like to have some continuity. We want to present 6 actions, and as we have already said, we want to support a campaign to defend free access to the vaccine as a social right, and that's why we want to work together to get signatures as Julie has asked us to. On the 8th of March, we want to organize some actions to defend a Europe free of patriarchat. And Cristina has said that in the Assembly of Women. We also, with the trade unions and different social movements, we want to get out of the crisis having a fairer tax system, and we want to help the countries that have been the most affected by the crisis. We will participate in the different mobilizations that are organized by the trade unions of the 1st of May, as Enrique Carmona has said. On the 5th of June, Environment Day, we want to organize different actions to defend a green Europe and to stop environment degradation and to develop policies to fight climate change. On the 8th of March, we want to celebrate Europe's victory against fascism. We will be at Mauthausen and we will defend public freedoms and citizens' rights against authoritarianism. And 6, we want to organize an action for solidarity and against racism, as we have said in that workshop. Dear colleagues and friends, as we were saying, all this work represent a call to the European peoples. We need to be hopeful and we need to open a new working period. We need to develop these different ideas that we have seen in these last few weeks in the Assembly, and we need to start to act. We need to implement the different actions that we have seen in the different documents. And this closing session has given us information about all of them. Thanks to all of you. We need to congratulate, as Pierre has said, another panelist also. We would like to congratulate and to thank those that have organized the forum in a very difficult situation. And I think it has been a big success. We have reached many conclusions. We will be there. We will see each other. We will continue struggling. And I hope that the next forum will take place in Athens. Thank you very much, dear comrades, and we will continue our struggle. Good work.
Ahora con